Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Sunday night hangout. These are happening frighteningly frequently. I'm not sure they'll continue happening this often. In fact, I'm sure they won't continue happening this often. I did have some free time, and that'll probably not last, as it usually doesn't. So I've done a hangout tonight. There was supposed to be a hangout with pyrrho around 5. It didn't start. So I laid down to take a nap. I got busy doing other stuff. And then when I got done doing other stuff, I found that something happened with pyrrho's room and nobody could log on. Apparently nobody ended up joining him. The link that he shared was taking us to a different hangout than the one that, anyways, so it's a disaster. Lee Ram we've got on. How are you doing this evening, sir? Double thumbs up. He's the first one to join us. You got there from the Facebook link. I assume everything's working well for me, but it's had problems with pyrrho tonight. All right. Well, last night we did touch on Nietzsche's philosophy for a while, and if we get some people in tonight, if pyrrho comes along, maybe we can continue to work with Nietzsche's philosophy. What do we see there? Thumbs down? You're too close to your camera. We can't see what's going on. Yeah. But if he comes along, we can discuss some more Nietzsche, possibly, or whatever we would have discussed if his podcast or whatever his hangout had worked. Let's see. How should we, while we wait for people to come along, are you muted? Let me see what's going on. He may have been muted. He'll try coming back on and see if that works. What's going on over there, kid? Do you need to get out of there? Come here. Can we hear you now?
I like that.
There we go.
Yes.
All right. Good times. What have you read of Nietzsche's? You said you knew about his what he says about women, right? His advice about women.
Actually, that's very good advice.
What is it?
Bring a whip.
Yeah, when you go to women, bring a whip.
Little favorite.
He had just been turned down for marriage proposal or something when he wrote that, though. So he was pretty angry.
Good advice for him then.
Yeah, it was projection of some kind or getting back at the world. Nietzsche was a failed romantic, so he never satiated, and that's where he got syphilis.
Oh, okay.
Because he needed to go to him. So, yeah, we can discuss Nietzsche. I don't have copies of his damn books, which are so useful. But
get them online for free.
Yeah, true. But if I had my copies, they're already marked up and dog-eared and brilliant. But there's the thing, for example, to walk on mountaintops. For that, one must have long legs.
Metaphors.
Yeah, well, he's full of them. That's what Beyond Good and Evil is.
I fucking hate metaphors.
Why? Now we touched on this yesterday. All thinking is metaphorical thinking.
No, not all thinking. If all thinking is that statement a metaphor? Because if that statement is a metaphor, then it's not exactly itself. So not everything is a metaphor.
No, you're right. 90% of thinking is metaphorical thinking. The 10% that's non-metaphorical is direct. You're talking about a direct thing, like probably a sensory perceived item. Other than that, metaphor gets awfully useful.
I disagree. because explaining something with a metaphor is going outside the thing. It's what normally you would, I don't know, if you want to understand fire, you'd look at everything that, or if you want to understand heat, my favorite example, you'd look at everything that's hot. Then you would say what it means to be hot. But if you use a metaphor, you know that heat is like something else in some way. Very, very vague. And I'm very much against vagueness.
Heat could qualify as one of the things that we can't speak about in metaphors.
Right.
But say international relations, how do we speak in anything directly sensory about that? And that's going to require nothing but metaphor.
I disagree. I can easily explain IR, international relations, without metaphors. I mean, you can just say countries have a policy goal to, well, depending on the country, countries have policy goals of, give me a country in the current political context.
Russia. Yeah, Russia.
So Russia has a political goal of expanding itself by invading other countries. That's not very metaphoric. That's quite exact.
Okay.
I mean, you could say Russia is a bully, and that would be a metaphor, but it would be a very concise metaphor because we all know what a bully is. So it would not be a metaphor. It's purely a metaphor.
Yeah, I would have to think of a good example of where thinking is
I mean, have you ever read Plato and Aristotle, like, back to back?
What?
Have you ever read Plato and then Aristotle?
Like on the same afternoon. I don't know. Probably.
Plato is full of metaphors. He only has metaphors. It's quite something. I mean, you read him and he talks about the goat herder and the ship and the star and whatever. It's insane. And Aristotle just tells it straight.
Yeah, no, you're probably right. I think that probably good writing is 10% metaphor and bad writing is 90% metaphor.
I agree with Ayn Rand, who said she would rather have the most direct explanation instead of the most beautiful metaphor in the world.
Richard Dawkins also goes on about this a bit. He says metaphors are misleading and very easily taken too far. They're uninformative and taken too far, and taken literally, and they're people go overboard.
Well, let's look at what the word metaphor means. You know what is the word meta? Meta is like outside of. For means form. So it's outside the form. You're literally going outside of something to explain it.
Right.
Well, that's what it says. But I mean, when you give a metaphor, you're saying, I'm not going to go to this phenomena. I'm going to go to another phenomena and let you pick out the vague similarities. Or the commonalities even. You wouldn't even call them similarities because you didn't identify the dimensions. So. Hello, Andrew.
Hey.
Andrew, do you come with a potential for discussing Nietzsche tonight? You know, Pyrrho's thing fell through for some reason. Nobody could join. His links were failed or something.
Oh, Pyrrho. Yeah, I was wondering what was going on, but Pyrrho can't do his hangout tonight?
Well, he started it late, and then the link that he gave us failed. It couldn't join for some reason. I don't know what happened. And so he spent a half an hour on camera by himself trying to figure out why nobody's could join through the link that usually they can. So I don't know what happened. Anyway, welcome here.
So does he know about this? Does he know about this one then?
Potentially. I don't know. I spread the word as far as I can. Do you know how to contact him? Google makes it very difficult to contact people directly.
Yeah, Google Plus sucks.
Yeah, Google Plus is a nuisance, and they've buried the YouTube messaging feature so far back in the YouTube stuff that most people don't know you still have a messaging section.
You do?
Yeah.
Where?
Go into profiles, into settings, into other settings, into functions. and on the far left side, halfway down, under a heading called Community, click on Community, then it has Messages. It's buried.
Yeah, on the main YouTube page, I used to be able to click on the bell in the top right corner, but now it has that like multicolored ball that I guess is loading something, but it just hangs. I actually have to go to my Google Plus page to get any of those notifications anymore.
Well, you've got a YouTube box that you probably haven't seen then for years. I hadn't opened mine for about 4 years. So when someone had told me how to get to it, because I mentioned in a video that YouTube messaging's gone, so they gave me directions how to get to it. I don't know why they hide it like that. They want us to use other stuff, or they're just manipulative, evil bastards. That's what it is. But do you come with a potential for discussing Nietzsche tonight? Because that's kind of what I was hoping to do with Pyrrho's thing. Well, Pyrrho's shit's always a train wreck, but
Yeah.
He is not sure that the stuff that exists without him. Something like that.
Yeah, I was gonna send Pyrrho the Hangout link, and then I can grab my Zarathustra and I can look for more stuff.
yeah, contact him in a reasonable fashion if you know how. I've put links everywhere that I think he might stumble across, you know, Facebook and such. I can't get to my YouTube video. I can't view it while I'm broadcasting, so.
Maybe he doesn't want to come.
How was it? How was it yesterday after I left?
It was good. It went on and on. So, well, I don't know how good it was. I got pretty faded. It went for like 5 hours. Didn't we go for 5 hours, Leram? Something like that?
Yeah, you did.
Out of control. We need Christopher Hitchens here for these late night things. He would fit in well.
What do you think Hitchens would say about Orlando?
Something stupid, because he always says something stupid, even if it sounds very clever, because he is British. Oh, yes, I think that it is such a way that, ho, 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 idiot. Twat.
He would probably say that it's a good thing that the LGBT community has been marching against Islamophobia, or this attack would have been much, much worse.
Uh-huh. You think he would say that?
No, but it's a brilliant observation. Like, how would the Muslims, how much would they hate gays if the gays hadn't been marching against Islamophobia? What, then they would really hate them? I don't think it makes any damn difference. I think the Muslims hate gays, period, full stop. And marching for or against Islamophobia just makes them look like tools.
They are too.
Yeah, I'm really surprised that the left defends. I guess they want to be seen as defending minorities of any stripe, but they don't realize that certain ones of them would hate their guts and would, if they were to take over, they would marginalize them. So it's like, I don't know, self-destructive, I think.
I mean, we all know this. This is my opinion on this. If there is someone that is weak, don't help him. He doesn't deserve it. Because invariably he's going to get in that other trouble, in some other trouble, and if you ever have a weak person with autonomy, he's going to be very mean. Because the weakest people are the meanest. Undoubtedly.
The weakest people are the meanest. You mean you
muted yourself. You're supposed to mute me. I was always going to mute me. He accidentally muted himself. Oops, quiet.
Oh, here, I got something to send you, Mr. Cropper. I sent this to Pyrrho a little.
Just give me 1 second, guys. My wife's here talking to me about something. All right, sorry, back on. Yeah, it was my wife was just here talking about things in the real world. So, Andrew, what did you have then? You said you were going to do something, or what?
Yeah, I got a link for you.
Okay.
I sent that to Pyrrho, I don't know, maybe a year ago. I came across it. Stephen Hicks is actually an objectivist, and he teaches in the States somewhere. And he's got a lot of fantastic material on philosophy of education, which is what my field is. And I used some of his stuff when I was teaching it. And anyways, he's got an article or like a blog thing there about comparing Nietzsche and Rand, and it's a huge list. It's a long table of comparisons, and it's actually quite interesting. So you might want to check that out someday, or even right as you flip through it.
Actually, let's do it now. So, issue, metaphysics, the fundamental stuff of the universe. The innermost essence of being is will to power.
Cropper, can you screen, what is it called, screen share or whatever, and bring that up?
Good idea. Let me see if I can get that on.
And click on yourself. Click on yourself so your screen stays up, and then the web page will be up, and it won't change or anything.
No, I can do it. Wait, no, I don't want to do it. Then you won't see my handsome face.
You don't want to see all the porn you've got up on your tabs there.
Thanks. I don't have... Do I? Yeah. Hey, what's wrong with porn?
Anime porn, I bet you.
You mean hentai, but no, I don't. Why would anyone watch that?
Are you able to see?
Yep.
There? All right.
I also have it on.
So, Nietzsche's position, I see. Now, is this guy an objectivist?
Yeah, he is.
He's simply done this work.
Yep.
He's an objectivist.
Yeah, he has a YouTube page too, and he has tons of videos, and I think the videos are on his website there too, but it's a lot of good stuff on his site.
All right. The ridiculous overestimation and misunderstanding of consciousness is a defense against reality. Consciousness is not a cognitive mechanism. That's interesting.
No answer physics. Identity. No. Yes. That's identity and change compatible. No. Yes. I mean.
I guess we'll have to look that stuff up. WP. What would WP be?
Will to power.
Oh, right.
Causality. No.
Well, remind me, Will to Power, was that not compiled by his sister or something like that?
No one for physics or biology. Alright, so they agree on God. They agree on God.
What was the posthumously published one? Wasn't it the Will to Power? They published it later.
I can't think of another one. I think it probably was the Will to Power.
I don't know if Ayn Rand said that psychology is not reduced to biology. I don't know what that statement even means. So.
Well, GS will be gay science.
What? Oh, no.
Well, under that one.
But it doesn't say, well, did Ayn Rand say that, what is it?
All right, here's an interesting one.
Biology, which is bad.
Sensations as awareness of reality, which is the really essence, of the break-off point for philosophers who are reasonable and those who aren't. Do you get your evidence from reality or not? So he says no. And then in TI he says yes. So let me read over those. Daybreak 117 in prison. The habits of our senses have woven us into lies and deception of sensation. These, again, are the basis of all our judgments and knowledge. There's absolutely no escape, no back way or bypath in the real world. So he, in the real world. Well, so he is a Kantian then.
Wait, then he says, yes, the senses, do not lie at all. What do we make of their testimony? That alone introduces lies. For example, the lie of unity, the lie of thinking, of substance, of permanence. Reason is the cause of our falsification of the testimony of the senses. Insofar as the senses so becoming, passing away and change, they do not lie. The apparent world is the only one. The true world is merely added by a lie.
And that's true. So that's brilliantly true. And the one above.
I disagree. That's not brilliantly true, because I mean, unity, thinghood is not.
Okay, you're right. You're right. I mean, the first bit was a bit of a mess, but the apparent world is the only one. The true world is merely added by a lie. That's if you define the true world a certain way, then that's true.
This is the reason I don't like reading Nietzsche. He changes his mind 5 times in a page.
That's why he keeps saying he died of insanity, so we just need to bear that in mind.
Why read him? I never understood.
Anyone who dies...
I mean, he has some nice sentences and stuff, but I mean, seriously?
Oh, come on. Nietzsche's fun. All the other philosophers are boring compared to Nietzsche. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, he's fun, but I mean, I don't read philosophers for fun.
Well,
the
then
influence.
you sir, need more excitement in your life.
If I want excitement, I read fiction. I'm not you.
Well, if I want excitement, I read Nietzsche.
Can't you just do a sport like everyone else?
Oh, I hate sports. I despise sports.
Oh, Christ. No wonder you're stuck with Nietzsche.
Okay.
I wonder what he said about sports. That would actually be interesting.
What
I do what he said about Homer.
What a non-essential philosopher said about a completely vapid activity.
Vapid. I don't think it's vapid.
Well, this is a fascinating table of ideas that he's put it into here. He says objectivism is false. Haha.
Self-knowledge. No, the so-called ego. Yes, in perspective. Nice, but the thing I don't like about this is that he just says yes, no, kinda for Ayn Rand. And for Nietzsche, he gives these long paragraphs. I don't care about Nietzsche. I want AR.
Well, Ayn Rand her positions are obvious and reasonable. Nietzsche's are muddy waters. So you've got to give a whole passage for Nietzsche's, and it's interesting that he can condense it into single passages. But sometimes that's probably not the whole story.
Philosophy is systematic.
That's an interesting thing. I'll put. I'll see.
Philosophy of science and relationship. What? Anti-a priori, inductive evidence. This is really. If you can see my screen, this is really disheartening. Saying so little on AR and about induction, because AR said a lot about induction, and this guy doesn't include it, which makes me doubt how well he knows the stuff.
How well the guy who made the table knows the stuff?
Yeah, because Ayn Rand said a lot more on the philosophy of science and relationship.
Seeing if I can find Beyond Good and Evil PDF. We can sink our teeth into some of the
Why?
aphorisms. Oh, there we go, yeah.
But I don't like aphorisms. They're aphoristic.
Yeah, but that's what happens when Nietzsche's on the table.
Well, can we get him off the table?
What would you discuss? Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology?
Yeah, so if you're offering.
Yeah. That should
That's everyone who's watching, maybe.
I want a bumper sticker that says, I do the ITO. Do you do the ITO?
Let's say ITOE.
ITOE, ITO.
Well, do you even ITOE, bro? Yeah, it's like, do you even live? Do you work out, by the way?
Hashtag ITOE.
Wait, do you work out, by the way?
40 hours a week.
Why?
Because they pay me to do it.
That's not working out. You're confusing working out with physical activity.
Did you start a new job, Mr. Cropper? I thought you did.
Yes. I just moved house, so it's just a weekend job, though.
Is it labor?
No. Yeah, kind of. I mean, it's a cooking job. It's a small restaurant, so it's basically whatever they need. If they need me out front or in the back of the house or whatever.
Oh, so you're an extra.
An extra head chef.
I used to work in a hotel. I had basically the same job as you. They called it an extra.
Uh-huh. Well, I'm not sure if you know what my job is.
Well, you just do whatever they need in the restaurant.
Well, that's because I know everything in the restaurant because I've worked in them for 20 years.
Whoa, that's a long time.
Well, 2 days a week for 20 years is not as long as full time, but
Yeah.
still.
It's what?
Did you ever get in touch with Lisa Van Dam a long time ago?
Yeah, we corresponded. There was not much to do unless I was going to show up at her door and ask for a job. I'm really glad I never did go to California because I really wanted to, and it's a mess there now.
Was she rude? Hello? Hello?
Was what?
Was Lisa Van Dam rude?
No.
Impolite? No. Every time I talk to the big shots, they're always very impolite.
Well, they can tell that you're a rationalist right away.
I'm not a rationalist. They're a rationalist. I'm really not, really, because I mean, I'm not, because I really take a lot of time to look at the, what do you call it? Well, the units.
All right, I'm trying. I can't remember the layout of Beyond Good and Evil, but I'm trying to find the juicy little two-sentence bits.
Wouldn't it be funner to read Homer instead?
Now I recall that it started around page 87, so let me
Wow,
see if
big
my memory's right.
I have a big nose, I do. Because I'm Jewish. Andrew, do you have a big nose?
No.
I don't think so.
There we go.
I don't believe you. Show it.
Well, isn't that because you were born in Israel? That's why?
You're trying to say, isn't it because you're Jewish?
Yes. No, no, not me. You.
Yes.
Well, that's why.
Yeah. No, actually, but to be fair, there are people in Israel and Jewish people with small noses.
Isn't it because the air is free?
No, it's because they fucked with the local people who have small noses.
Well, I've found the juicy bits in Beyond Good and Evil. Andrew, have you read Beyond Good and Evil?
I've listened to most of it on audiobook.
Ah, that's near as good. Yeah, with this sort of stuff, that's nearly as good as reading it. So,
like I remember at the beginning, he says about what can come from its opposite, and then he says about truth being a woman and stuff like that.
well, the best part of that particular book is chapter 4, starting on chapter 4, and that's what I'm. Are you able to see my screen? Am I still doing that?
Yeah. Oh, there's Gato.
Chapter 4 starts on
Hello,
page,
everyone.
in this case.
Yes.
Welcome to the shindig. We're doing Nietzsche tonight. How are you doing this evening?
Doing good, yeah. Just about to go to bed and decided to join in. Yeah.
Well, we'll make you sleepy with some Nietzsche here.
Not really. I'm not very familiar with Nietzsche, but I would like to learn.
Yeah, I've got it on screen share here, so that should. This here is page 98 of his book Beyond Good and Evil, and these are little one-sentence little thoughts. Each one of them is like a self-contained essay. And it's like a thesis for an essay that he should write but never did, so he just wrote down a bunch of theses.
He's lazy.
But this first one here, he was insane. This first one here, Andrew, speaks to you and I because we have done teaching as some part of our life. He who is a thorough teacher takes things seriously, even himself, only in relation to his pupils. It doesn't, I have to say, it doesn't strike a chord with me, but he's talking to us. knowledge for its own sake. This is the last snare laid by morality. We are thereby completely entangled in morals once more. Yes, also not anything
Yeah,
like
yeah, knowledge for its own sake. I don't, in my case, I don't like to learn for its own sake. I like to learn because of a purpose, not for just knowing, if you know what
right.
I'm saying. But I guess Mon would have to think differently, right?
I think it's really hard to learn unless you have a sort of a purpose in your mind for it.
No, it
Exactly.
takes a lot of willpower to learn something.
Well,
So,
Well,
not if you have a
not
purpose.
if you have the right motivation.
Yeah.
no, it takes willpower, period. Motivation helps willpower, but it's not enough. Especially if you gotta learn something for real. If you just learn to memorize words, it's easy, but if you actually think about this stuff and look for stuff, that's hard.
Well, I think it's like 70% motivation and 30% effort because you have to put some effort into it.
No,
It's
it's
not
not
just
a question of effort. It's a question of how do you put effort. And putting effort means revising your thinking method and modifying it for the task at hand, which is pure willpower almost. Insane amount of it.
well. If in my case, if I find a reason to change my mind, I will. And that's like that's easy, very easy for me.
You can't
But
explain what is heat and you're a physicist. Why are you telling me this?
go ahead, say again.
I said you call yourself a physicist and you have a hard time explaining what is heat. Why are you saying it's easy?
Well,
Well, I have a hard time explaining heat. I know exactly what heat is.
Tell me what heat is.
Well, heat are the the movement of particles at the molecular level. And those particles they irradiate infrared.
How do
Yeah.
you know?
all right. I think that I can say that that is true. That is a very good definition of heat, but that is off the subject. And I did want to address what you had said, Superfin Guy, about knowledge for its own sake. If you're pursuing knowledge, reading something, watching a documentary, if you are watching a documentary or studying something or reading something that you don't really know why you're reading it, then the stuff doesn't stick as well as if it's something that you're passionate about and interested in. Then the facts and things stick and glue into place easier, and everything works well. Whereas if you don't have a purpose in mind, or if you are just reading it because you have to read it for class or something like that, and you can read right over stuff, and later on you basically forgot what you even read. So I agree that that is the case, that you do have to have some purpose or reason.
Yes.
Andrew, might you say, would you say that it's easier for you to read sort of out of the way esoteric stuff because of your the way you make your living?
What does he do for a living?
Teaching of some kind.
I don't think he's around because his mic is off.
I think he's AFK.
Yeah.
Away from keyboard.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think that was a meaty little piece for that little bit. I don't know what he means about the rest of it, though, the snare of morality and that. But anyway, we can pass on. The charm of knowledge would be small were it not so much shame has to be overcome on the way to get it. Is he talking about the shame of the apple and the tree and Eve and all that, or what? Why is there shame in getting knowledge? But
Who knows?
What he means, yeah.
Well, maybe. I mean, in the 1800s, reason and knowledge was really fashionable, but I don't see how it could be a matter of shame. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
In the 1800s, not in the 60s.
1800s.
Doesn't apply.
We are most dishonorable towards our God. He is not permitted to sin. That's funny. The Greeks didn't have that. Their gods were very bad people.
Well,
Yeah.
Depends on the god. Athena was okay.
They killed each other.
No, they
Yeah,
didn't.
because
Well, depends
I
who.
guess I guess it was because the Greek gods, they were personally,
People.
anthropomorphic representation of nature, of things, not only things in nature but also of concepts, right?
No, they
So
were
that's why they had a bad side and good sides.
no, they were superheroes. Did you mute me again?
The Greek gods have a dualism. Yeah, they have bad sides and good sides, like human beings. They were big
Yes.
humans.
Yes. For example, they have the god of love, all those things. Those are things that people are real things in people's lives.
No, that's not how it works.
Oh, I think we may have Pyrrho joining us.
Yeah, he's on.
Be a wonderful thing. Let's see if we have him here. We're just getting into some juicy ones. The tendency of a person to allow himself to be degraded, robbed, deceived, and exploited might be the diffidence of a god among men.
What?
Yeah, so says somebody who allows themselves to be degraded, robbed, deceived, and exploited is a good person, a god among men. Now, who is that? Is that the masses? Are the masses deceived, robbed, degraded, and exploited by the overclass? And so he's saying the masses are moral?
Well, what I get from this is that maybe he's projecting. Like, I think maybe he experienced shame and people try to bully him or something because he was different. Because he ended up alone, right?
Yeah. Okay, yeah. He's claiming himself to be that person, a god among men, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly. Like the outcast, the suffering outcast.
Yeah, and he suffers with diffidence, and he is the god among men. No, you're right. He's talking about himself there.
Yeah.
All right. Love Nietzsche. Love his ego. Okay, 67. Love to one only is a barbarity, for it is exercised at the expense of all others. Love to God also. I remember not liking that sentence when I read it. To love one person is barbarity because then you don't love other people. I don't know what exactly he means, but it's a thick idea, whatever he's doing with it.
Yeah.
I did that, says my memory. I could not have done that, says my pride, and remains inexorable. Eventually the memory yields. Yeah, he's talking about himself there, I think.
It seems so, yeah.
One has regarded life carelessly if one has failed to see the hand that
I don't think he's... Why would he be talking about himself? If he did that himself, he wouldn't be writing that down.
Well...
He's writing that about other people and including himself because he has human nature, kind of like saying, I shouldn't do this, but I did, says one to oneself. So yeah, he's acknowledging he's been in that situation, but he's noticed that the memory yields, which if you notice that the memory yields, then it didn't really yield. He's not that way.
Yeah, I think he said it in a moment of honesty, right? He has done that. He does do that, but...
A moment, these books, he went over and over. His editing process was over and over, iterating. That's how he whittled down these aphorisms in a heavy editing process. None of this stuff happened just in a moment.
Okay, maybe these ones. Zarathustra, he apparently wrote in a hurry.
Well, he's talking about his himself and his experiences with other people.
Yeah, well, you've just had a lot of them of always talking about himself. No, I think he's talking about human nature in a lot of these. I'm not saying I agree with all of them. For example, to love only one is a barbarity. To me, that's a poetic thing. There's a good point there, right? Like codependence or enabling. But, he's not saying that to love one person is just, you should probably love more than one. But it's mostly poetic. But it's these ones where you're saying, oh, he's just accidentally revealing himself. Well, he revealed himself on purpose, and I think he's pretty careful. But anyway, Fair enough for your opinions, though. But on that one, come on. I think he's catching all of us, and we do all do this. This is a natural human thing. You can overcome it. The point is, it's the natural way your brain works.
Yeah, no, I think he was making a note there on human nature.
The same way the other way around too. It's like I did that. It's the poetic part is he could have wrote I didn't do that, says my memory, and I must have, says my pride, and that would be maybe even more true. But anyway, I'm back. Hey, thanks for putting up a room.
Hey, no, yeah, for sure. So what happened to the other thing? Nobody could get on, or what happened?
One, my wife's family we live by came over, and so I missed the time, and I started at 7. So people didn't know when it is. That was a little bit too long. And I could still get them going if I do that, if I stay for about an hour, but I didn't have the energy to do a video for an hour waiting for people, so.
Yeah, I was wondering whether whether the link was failing, or if you had already stopped, and maybe you had already stopped or something.
Oh, yeah, I went about 20 minutes, and it was 2 hours late, so yeah. Well, so anyway, sorry about that. I'm trying to be good and start it on time. I've been pretty good about doing it every Sunday. It's kind of hard work to do one regularly. Not my original style of making videos is all about, hey, I have 5 minutes right now. But so I blew it this week, though. I just moved into my house, and family's all coming over.
Well, you get 1 week off for moving.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Yeah, this is a different style of, boy, it's a marathon. It used to be I would get in front of the video for 5-10 minutes, shut it off, and then I could have my beer and blow my nose. But when you're here for 5 hours, you have to buck up.
It's funny how long it goes on, though. I mean, the conversational culture, or someone like you, actually, which I appreciate you want other people and you let opposite views have it. It's amazing how quick it can go. Like I've started on Sundays where I thought, I don't really have energy, but it's Sunday and I'll do it. It's good to have a regular thing like any regimen, and it's good, and then people can know that they could show up, and that makes it more regular. And then thinking I will go, but I'm just going to do an hour or two, and then boom, it's like 6 hours.
Yeah.
So, which is a good thing though, but it does make it harder to do regular, but it's obviously a good thing, right? I mean, I don't think it was that way 5 years ago. It was hard to keep the conversations going. We're all actually getting better at being expert in the various topics and the opinions of other people. It makes the conversation go longer.
Yeah, and it's easier to study more of this stuff. I mean, if I mention some guy, you can go look him up on YouTube, whoever it is, and get an hour or two on him, whoever it is, So people are informed. It's good. This is like it reminds me of being in college, and you can get into those conversations that go late into the night accidentally, and you didn't see it coming. And now you can sort of do it with people all over the nation and world for free on Google. It's amazing.
Yeah, well, because in the city you can continue that kind of thing if you find the right bookstores and coffee shops and group of friends and stuff in the city. But when I left the city, like 2000, no, it's hard to talk even politics, or so the internet really has made that better. But on the other hand, it's the early days of TV, where most of the internet, if you just looked at it, it's like pro wrestling and worse in porn, But there's definitely the good part is happening. The PBS or David Attenborough or whatever, it's happening at the same time that we're getting all this flood of it's destroying news. I love political blogging, and I did it for 8 years and was involved in some of these blogs, and it became so disgusting, left and right. There's great blogs as individuals, but overall it's no journalism. It's become ridiculous, and now the journalists, so-called, are covering whatever was on Twitter.
Yeah.
Right? Have you noticed? I mean, it's
turned around. Like journalism was trying to ignore the internet, and now that's all they talk about is what the internet's doing and saying.
They were actually getting more actual news out to people in a half an hour back in the day than they're able to actually get out now. Now you can go on the internet and research stuff and go to local newspapers in India or wherever you're looking up the story. You can dig for it better than you could on your own. But in terms of anybody actually being a journalist, they were actually, who is the comedian that's like, oh yeah, Norm Macdonald. It's like, yeah, back when I was a kid, We had a half a hour of the news, and it turns out, you know what it turns out? There is only a half a hour of news.
Yeah. Well,
he always talks like that, half a hour or something. He has a weird way of talking. He's kind of conservative. He's turned out way more conservative. I always liked him when he was young, when he was a stand-up before Saturday Night Live. Didn't really like the Saturday Night Live stuff, but he's a funny stand-up. He's got a very interesting sense of humor.
There's some conservatives out there, and there's Adam Carolla and these guys. Huh?
Yeah. Well, he's being called conservative. I have some friends that like him, and he's definitely more independentarian or whatever. But he's getting called conservative now because he's not a big fan of, having kids you can't afford, and then having a dole system for it, and that, that's enough to be. But he's libertarian and pro-gay and modern. Modern. Is that not liberal? You don't have to be some dogmatist. He's an okay guy. He probably is a little more conservative than me, but
the libertarian thing's taking over, isn't it? I mean, like the idea that the government needs to get out of our business and that we don't need the welfare state. I mean, I don't know if there's enough real belief in it to make it a fact, but there are a lot of people who don't buy the nonsense anymore.
Well, I think there's a generational thing, because I know I'm 48, and I know a lot of people my age and younger that studied and were very familiar with libertarianism. In my own case, it was from the left. Left libertarianism, exists. It's about personal liberty. Back in the 70s, when supposedly liberals were all good and the conservatives had been vanquished and stuff, part of that was that as a liberal, you could, Jimi Hendrix, let your freak flag fly. And it didn't have to be a freak flag. It could be your normal person flag, whatever. You get to be an individual. And the whole dogmatism of political correctness arising in the 90s, a dogmatic view of liberalism, that was a new thing. But so I think there's a lot of people, but then now there's leftist, progressive type libertarians don't consider themselves libertarians, just like environmentalist libertarians don't consider themselves environmentalists. My mom used to be an environmentalist. She believes exactly the same way as always, but when they started tree spiking trees, back in the 80s or whatever, she decided not to call herself an environmentalist anymore. But really, libertarianism, I think it's about personal liberty, right? How do you get personal liberty? And to me, whatever it takes to enhance personal liberty is what you should do without preconceptions. I mean, if you needed to tax people more to do that, and I'm not suggesting that's the case or anything simple like that, then you would, though. There is no rule of libertarianism other than we're trying to create personal liberty for people and enhance it, because it really never has existed, right? The closest you ever had is you could go off in the woods and make your own log cabin, but that's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about you should be able to have liberty and be in a city. You don't have to be a slave to be in a city to work with other people and live with other people. You should be able to be a communal animal to a degree, meaning there's a bagel shop you all go to or don't go to, and still be free. So I consider myself a progressive libertarian just because I do think there's some progressive policies that that help liberty.
So you would be willing to violate liberty in what you would say would be occasional instances if it served the overall goal of liberty itself? Like
that doesn't follow, because that isn't how it works.
Well, if taxes are a violation of liberty, and we use the taxes to what?
Well, I don't think they are. I don't think taxes are a violation of liberty.
Oh, clearly, someone putting a gun at your head and saying, if you don't pay this, you're going to go to jail is a violation.
Well, I think you're being hyperbolic.
No, I'm being, I'm avoiding euphemism and metaphor. And
well, first of all, when was the last person assassinated or put to capital punishment? Is not a punishment for tax evasion, as far as I know.
Oh, we don't need that. All we need is people being locked up in jail or the home.
Any law has a gun behind it, so that's just easy to say. Any law you disagree with. You don't believe there should be any taxes? Well, why should you be using money that my co-op, my government treasuries print? Why do you even have to use that?
Right.
Don't use it. You don't have to pay taxes. Just live everything you do on barter.
So no, come on. We would use the gold standard. The government really shouldn't be involved in money. Yeah, there shouldn't.
So mining companies should, though, be our bank.
You could run it.
Why would the value of everything in our economy just happen to match the amount of gold available?
It doesn't. The price of gold goes up over time as we become more productive. So it doesn't. That's not a problem. I'll tell you what, paper causes more problems than a lack of or abundance of gold. If you say gold going up and down in value is a bad way to run the economy, what about paper? Jesus Christ.
Well, let's say America was privatized, no more taxes, and so all the assets were sold off. And just to be fair, let's say all the citizens got a fair share of the proceeds of selling all the parks and the post office and the military and everything. And
I sell the military.
And then it was bought by a big conglomerate that ran it exactly as it's run now. And instead of taxes, you had to pay, like the gated community fee.
Well,
which happen to be exactly the same as the taxes, and if you don't like it, you can go to the market of nations and choose another nation.
Well, as long as we can keep the police, the courts, and the military under Uncle Sam's control, I say we just try it and see what happens.
Yeah,
well,
like the.
And how are we going to pay for them without taxes?
Voluntary taxation.
Yes.
So funny.
Same way.
Like people pay for things that they need. For example,
voluntary
like the police.
taxation for the fire department, Jen.
No, not fire department.
No, not fire. I said police, courts, and military.
Oh, no, fire's on your own. Police, courts, and
people-
military.
Just the people that use guns
think-
are the only ones that get paid from taxation.
I think
Voluntary
people
taxation.
pay.
And the cops.
So are you
For-
saying that everybody would be protected by the police, but only people that wanted to would pay? Because I'm not going to do that. I'll just hire my own. I'll just hire my own security guy, or just buy my own guns.
And you could in a free economy. Super Fin guy, you keep.
Yeah, I'm sure that would be really free. Everybody running around with their own armed force, like that worked out really well in places. We call those warlord zones.
No, it created.
No, you mean the Wild West.
It wouldn't be like that, because I think we'd have associations to control the government and stuff. Because for we to have a society, a place where people can live together, there has to be some communication, some associations to control things. It won't.
So you want to prohibit my right to join together? Well, if I buy 1,000 acres with 1,000 other people, and we have a big, system and community, gated community, am I allowed to do that? Am I allowed to write a constitution and then say if you want to be a part of it, you have to pay a fee, and your kid can be a part of it, but they have to pay the fee, and maybe they have to work the grounds for 2 years too, or do some other thing to keep it going? I can make those kinds of agreements, right? It's just called a general partnership. We can all make any agreement we want, right? And I can have one that looks just like a government.
No, because
as long as it is voluntary and there's some justice inside.
Well, it is voluntary.
I don't. Yeah.
You don't have to live in the United States.
Yes, you do.
No, you
Yes,
don't.
you do. I have my apartment here. I have my work here. So
you
I have
do
to
live here. You do live here, granted, but you don't have to live there.
What kind of an argument is that? You don't have to be.
It's
here.
called market. It's called the free market.
Let me finish.
No, we run this country the way we decided. When you immigrated, you signed up for our
Stop being
rules.
impolite. Stop being rude. Let me finish. Good. I mean, imagine in Nazi Germany, someone would say, you don't like, before, it was illegal to leave. You don't like it, you can leave. Would that make it a fair and just state? No. It would just
If you
make
immigrated,
it
this
just
isn't
just
Nazi
unjust.
Germany. This isn't Nazi Germany. You immigrated to the United States at some point. There was a constitution. Well, not in my case, but for most people, there was a constitution. It says you have to pay the fees in order to be here. End of story. That's your agreement. And your grandchild doesn't get out of that agreement. They can leave the property, just like if you own a house and sell the water rights to someone else, and your grandchild inherits the house, they still don't have the water rights.
I just told you, the fact that you can leave doesn't make the state justified in the way it acts. What kind of an argument is that? the state is unjust. Well, you don't have to use it if you don't like it. It's still
the
unjust.
same as why you don't have to buy a you don't have to buy fast food at
It's not
McDonald's,
because
or why you don't have to get your car at Ford.
because the U.S. is public. It doesn't belong to
What
anyone.
I'm telling you is
belongs
it could be private and run exactly the same way, and then what would your choice be? Just
What
leave.
do you mean by that? I just told you. Just
Okay, if
That
for
would be
example a
different.
if you know what a gated community is, and it's all owned at some time by one person, then it's partitioned out and people buy houses, but there's a housing organization, and they tell you whether you can have, you know, broken down cars in your yard and all these rules, and you sign up and you go in there and you take part in that gated community. The United States, if it was privatized, all the government's functions would be just like a gated community, and they could charge you whatever fee they want, and all you could do would be move.
no. Well, what about Nazi Germany?
In my government, you get to vote. You're lucky.
Let me
Get to
finish.
vote.
Stop
No,
interrupting.
you let me finish.
How about you
I
manage?
wasn't finished.
You
In my country, you get a chance to vote, and you're lucky for that, because in a privatized system, it's just get the hell out.
What does that have to do with it? I mean, you can just say you can leave.
I don't want to live in the country you guys are describing.
Why a
So
second?
I'm not gonna. And when you immigrate to my
never
country,
stop
you
talking.
sign up for my system already.
You never stop talking. You notice that.
Oh, fuck you.
No, fuck you. I want to
Well,
say something.
well,
You say something.
You
and then
say
you make
plenty
another
of
point.
bullshit. It's
Why do
just
you make a
rhetoric.
point if you don't let people reply?
Well, in the U.S. you have political free will. You can influence the politics. You can make things your own way. You know, it's a free country. It's not a concentration camp.
Pyrrho, why do you
Not
say
the taxes. The taxes are written into the Constitution. Get used to it.
Pyrrho,
Not really. Like
No.
income
Oh,
tax
yes,
is
really.
not.
Yes, really. The right to levy taxes is written in the Constitution. Yeah, really.
and the right to be free,
Well, maybe we should
Maybe
change
it is.
that.
the right to be
Maybe
free
you
of
should.
taxation is also there. That's why they had to amend it.
The fact is, you get a chance to try to change it. It's pretty difficult, but you have a chance to do that. We have a way for you to do that. Meanwhile, whoever moved into this country signed up for that, and that's that. Your grandma or grandpa or whoever's moved here signed up for it. You don't like it, go somewhere else like you came here.
That's not a justification. The
It
fact that,
is.
if you don't like it, you can
You
leave.
signed a contract, and I expect you. You signed a contract, and I expect you to keep
You didn't sign
it.
a contract. That's the exact
Yes, you
thing.
did.
You didn't sign a contract anywhere.
Are you in America? In America?
No, yes, in the continent, not in the what you call America, which is shouldn't be called
Someone
America.
that has come to the United States of America has indeed signed papers agreeing to not
By
be
each individual
treasonous against the Constitution. They've signed a contract that said they agreed
What
that
about
on their children? Excuse me, their children have the same right according to the Constitution. Their children have the same exact right, not more rights. They don't have the right to break the rules that their parents had signed up for, and that's how it always works with contracts and liens.
What contract? There was no contract.
Well, I think there's no contract.
Yes, when people immigrate
What
to
contract?
this country, they have to immigrate, and they
Well, what
sign
about the
papers
Native
that
Americans?
say they will not, that they agree to the Constitution of the United States. I pledge allegiance, etc.
What about the people who were Native Americans and weren't born into it and never did that thing? Are they?
Yeah,
and they
that's
just go around
no,
killing people
they-
and
no,
discriminating,
actually,
saying, we never
right.
signed a contract, nor did
No,
my
they're
ancestors."
not. They should actually get the land back that we for the treaties
All the
that we
land.
said they could have. Oh yeah, use them. You want to use them on your side, but in reality, oh, you don't give a shit. So yeah, that was fake.
Yeah,
That was
the
fake.
thing- But it doesn't matter.
Also,
who's
I
running
came
the
over
country.
on the Mayflower. My ancestors came on the Mayflower, so I also came before there was an agreement.
I don't care.
Well, me neither. I like the agreement we came up with, and everybody else is stuck with it. Until you change it according to the agreement itself, like every other contract on the earth.
Well, Pyrrho, what if we had a system more like in the 1800s, and if big changes came to this country, we could change the laws enough so that it was a system where, like it was then, you were responsible for your own person by and large, and people did get together in communities of several thousand out in the West and stuff. Now we have 50 individual states, and so there would be 50 different ways for this stuff to be flushed out. But if the federal government just took hands off and said, we will take and we will announce how much is paid by corporations for their taxes, that'll be a public knowledge, and then we will take donations from the private economy. And so what you'd do is you would have, like, General Motors would say, we're donating 1,000 tanks and 500 helicopters this year, and they would brag about it. And
why do you think they would do that?
Okay, then there would be this other company, Ford, and everybody would be doing news stories. Ford gave 100 cop cars this year. That's all.
Why? You think they would do it for the good press?
Yes.
And how would they make money?
Selling cars to the public. Okay, so they make 14 million cars this year. They give 180,000 to Uncle Sam. Something like that.
Why don't they do that now? There's plenty of schools that need books. Why don't the book publishers give free books?
They do it right now. They give Uncle Sam $14 million, and Uncle Sam turns around and buys thousands of cars for the different police forces. So it happens right now. It's already happening. But this way, it would be a public relations coup for the companies, and the government would get to sort of hold this receipt up and say, we didn't get very much from this company this year or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's a bad deal for me.
And you can drop money in your local mailbox, except it wouldn't be a mailbox anymore because that'd be private. It would be a government donation.
But my family's been here fighting the Civil War and World War I and World War II, and I just don't feel that's a very good deal for this land that we perhaps stole from the Indians, but it's ours now. We stole it fair and square by the rules of history.
Yeah.
And I don't see any reason that that's a good deal for me, just relying on the generosity of General Motors.
No, you could pay.
They'll give them to Mexico where their plants are. That's what I think.
Oh no, if they.
Oh no, they'd move back up here right away. So you say it's a big risk, Brandon. It's a big risk.
If the economy were freed
could happen.
If the economy were freed up in this way, we would be a much better site for business than Mexico. I mean, they go to Mexico because there are enormous payoffs. But if they could
cheap labor, and if we work for as cheap and expect as little as Mexican workers, they'll come back here. Yay, boy, come on back, boys.
Yeah, why don't we want
got my anus for you?
No, we should have the factories here instead of Mexico. That's obvious, regardless. Obviously.
They could afford to have the factories in the United States right now, but they just rather take the margin. Same with all the clothes. In Maine, LL Bean makes quality clothes at a reasonable price, all U.S. workers. Why does Trump say he's got to make it in China? It's a terrible thing to do, but you got to do it. I'm a businessman. No, you don't. Only if you want that extra $5 an hour in your own already rich pocket rather than, build your economy and communities locally.
Yeah, I can't defend Trump, but these businesses are closer to going out of business in any given year than you realize, and I know a lot of them do. A lot of businesses. All the businesses in the United States go out of business constantly.
Well, some are close to that, some aren't. Some are strong. LL Bean is pretty strong.
Ford, General Motors, and
because their product sucks.
Dodge and Chrysler before that, and whenever they
the auto industry. Yeah, I agree. American auto industry sucked for decades.
The airline industry constantly going on business bankrupt, rolling themselves together. IBM just about evaporated. International Business Machine Company almost went up in smoke, but managed to hold on somehow by sort of glomming on to other chip manufacturers and stuff. So
I don't know about that. What do you mean? What are you talking about?
Well, I'm talking about the fact that Apple and Microsoft are the computer companies. And
yeah, no. But through that whole era, while Microsoft and IBM was the old thing, IBM's revenues were always greater. Microsoft's revenues finally surpassed IBM's, but IBM's never been close to death whatsoever. They might have been scared.
No, what I'm saying is IBM started in, the 1930s. Microsoft started in the late 70s or something, the 80s sometime. Apple started in the late 70s, early 80s. So where IBM looks like it had a 40-year head start and looks like it was a big stable company, actually all of its functions, everything it thought it was doing that was important, virtually evaporated under its nose. So
that's not the case, though, Brandon. It's just a bad example, I think. But I see what you're getting at.
Where is IBM today? And if that's a bad example, then what
They're
about
huge.
the airline?
IBM is huge, with the fastest supercomputers on the world, all the biggest. The NSA is running IBM computers in there. They are huge. They're going to outlive Microsoft, I guarantee you, because their engineering is still good and it always has been.
Well, only because they were willing to change paradigms over to the Microsoft Apple paradigm that was taking over the world. If they would have stayed in the old model, then they never would have gone anywhere.
No, they actually skipped the Apple and Microsoft thing and adopted open source because that was better engineering, but they kept the old IBM model where you have a complete IBM system, from the worldwide network to the database, Informix. And so the really people that have been computerized from the 50s have continued to use IBM. What IBM lost was they were not able to take over the microcomputer market, even though they had the first successful PC. So they lost the growth in this new market, but all the serious, what we call heavy iron computing, IBM never went away. They never failed
so you've got 1,000 details and you can't see the larger principle. The larger principle.
No, I told you I get what you're getting at.
It's what I'm pointing out that these companies aren't as invincible. Just because they make a profit one year doesn't mean that they are super invincible entities.
I don't think they are invincible. You must think.
Well, you think that you can always just tax them.
You can always just tax them. I think you can tax any entity in the United States because that's what the Constitution says, and I don't know another way to do it. You have another suggestion, fine, but don't tell me I'm immoral that you're keeping the agreement to pay taxes. The question of how much taxes is sort of way more subtle than you think people should be taxed, therefore you're going to tax them to death. No, actually. Why would I do that?
The largest and wealthiest churches on earth are American voluntary taxation jigs.
Yeah, that's true.
They ought to be taxed by the U.S. They should not be tax-free.
Yeah, but you still didn't make a case why taxation.
I don't have to make a case. Taxes are the law of the land. You have to make the case that you should not have to pay your fee.
So you're beyond good because you're the law. In that sense, the Nazis were...
I'm not the law. The U.S.
the
Constitution is the law.
So you're above this because you're representing the law. In that case,
I support the taxation. The concept.
In that case, all that was needed to make Nazi Germany justified is for them to write it into law.
Hey,
that's what it means.
Don't let Laren have controls because he's muting people.
Well, he's interrupting me. I mean, when I do it, he silences me, which is fair.
Laren, seriously.
I think Brandon's point is the one. He has suggested an alternative. I'm open to alternatives that businesses and people would voluntarily pay taxes. I don't like that idea because that means that the people that are good enough to realize they need to put in to the group effort of police or whatever, they pay more and they're just enabling all the lazy shits. It's like the dole without taking taxes in the first place to hand it out. And the most lazy people that don't want to help, believe me, they'll be there taking the services. I don't like that idea, but I'm open to other suggestions.
Not really, because we could have, for example, an insurance system. If you are provided with some services, you owe whatever company is providing the police services. It could work like that. There are various ways that that problem could be solved.
Right. You know? See, I don't want someone that couldn't afford to pay that to get raped and us to go, well, I don't like that. And I come from poor working class people that, they can't afford to pay insurance. I've many members of my family right now opting out
Okay.
of the Obamacare rather than get insurance. They can't afford it. They have to take their chances, and they're brave. That's how we do it.
All right. Well, that's a good example. That's a good example to look at. What if we just granted that that we just let people whatever, they have to deal with it on their own? Like if you get raped, whatever. If we did that and we also had the Second Amendment there, that problem solved. You would basically be responsible for your own defense in a very bad way.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. No,
Yeah,
let
exactly.
me finish, because there would be 50 states, and inside those 50 states, 10,000 counties and communities. And if people had a hard time in one, they would up and leave, and you would end up with nothing but a bunch of poor people shooting each other. And that would be a disaster for that area, and that type of system would crumble and disappear and be taken over, and it would be like a bankrupt company. It would be a scattering of resources available to the first company that could come in and bring order and utilize that. So those areas would grow less and less. So, Pyrrho, what if I made the utilitarian argument that although it looks a little hectic, in the long run, they would be a safer nation. The nation as a whole would be safer than it is right now if you allowed individuals to have more say in how their local protection was done.
Yes, and I'm kind of a federalist, a liberal version of one. I believe in distributed. Local government should have a chance, and I've even loosened up what I think states should be able to decide. But I think what I really, the level that I really, advocate would be like, okay, you have taxation. It shouldn't be onerous, but whatever it is, I believe that you should get to decide. I want, you should have 20 categories, and I want 5% in education, and 20% in state this, and 3% in parks, and 4% in military. And of course some people would be like 100% military, and another one would be 100% endowment for the arts. But we know how statistics works, and the bulk would probably be similar to what the consensus really is. I would trust that, and that would allow people to decide how their money is spent, because I don't like how my tax money is spent.
Well, in the model that I'm giving you, you would only voluntarily give money for things that involve the use of guns. Everything else you would have to do on your own in the free economy. If you want arts to be supported, you'd have to do something about that. You couldn't give it to the government. The government would run the police, the courts,
right,
the military, only things that use guns. So,
well, I don't agree with that, but I think that's a really cogent way of putting the position that you're advocating, right? I think that's an interesting distinction that should be used, and I would say we should have more group, stuff than that. But I agree with you. I think when you get down to what has to be done in a group way, or you were calling government, I don't even like the word government, but I think that's interesting. I do believe that is the bottom line, right? If nothing else, things that require gunplay, it's fair to have the regulation, the training, the accountability to everybody, universal protection. Like the military is stuck protecting the whole of the United States, right? You can't say, Utah, you won't pay your taxes. Well, we're protecting everybody but you, because Utah will just be like, yeah, well, I don't think they're going to get in here.
Right. And it's the problem that people bring up. Oh, then the town would be run for profit. Well, not really, because we've taken away the ability to run a town for profit, because you can run a store for profit or a company, but the town itself is overseen by the police. And the police do things like investigate fraud and embezzlement, and you have to play by the rules, because there are these people with guns walking around who have no interest in making money. They get their paycheck by other means.
Yeah. Well, I think you have the best, that's the best version of a minarchy. Because you're right, things like corrupt water companies, let's say there's a lot of dispute resolution, but you actually do have police and an actual court system that, so you have private police and stuff, but it does bubble up to the Supreme Court of this. I think that's a good minarchy. I think it would be hard to have a minarchy smaller than that. What I've always said is the problem is when you do that, if that's your minimum, you have a problem. To enforce those decisions requires a very powerful organization. So that means that that's still going to be a pretty big government, that minarchy. But yeah, no, you know what I mean? I'm reserving my own opinion, but no, I think you're making a good point. For the minarchy, and we don't need government, and taxes should be minimized or even eliminated, I think that's a sensible place that you draw the line and say you acknowledge this kind of security, and really gunplay is a good way to put it. Gunplay, explosives, whatever, grabbing people, the right to arrest, any of that stuff that is normally a violation of rights, threatening people normally a violation of rights. Put that in that. Yeah, I would love. That's a good science. Would be a good science fiction, thought experiment. Just write that up with that limit.
Many of the viewers will be aware that that is, I think, the third essay in The Virtue of Selfishness by Ayn Rand, or perhaps it's in Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal, but it's in one.
Oh, right. Okay, I'm not familiar with that on memory then. Yeah, well.
Basically, everything that I've gone over is her position on voluntary taxation, and so you are more of an objective.
Well, I disagree with the voluntary taxation. I'm saying that if you are a minarchist, but you're saying, look, my minimum of the minimum size of government is the police still have to be a part of government and the military, then I think that's a more sensible kind of minarchy than the idea that you could just have just go back into the forest or whatever.
Well,
but the voluntary taxation doesn't seem logical. I just don't see any evidence that. And the thing is, if it did work, then the good companies would be spending money, and the bad companies would be spending money to out-compete and out-advertise. Some of the companies would make the decision of, well, instead of give 14 million cars, we will just spend, that $1 billion on advertising or
Breitbart News would be
bribes.
Breitbart News would be right there on the scene and say, now, why didn't you give any money to the government this year?
People aren't paying that close attention, though, Mr. Cropper.
They would, because
people don't now. People do not pay that close attention to things that supposedly matter to them right now.
Well, that particularly doesn't matter right now because that's taken care of by the government. It's not their problem. The IRS will see to it. But if it was a matter of Breitbart News, and if we could shame them into giving $100 million this week, and just all of a sudden they say, all right, we're giving $100 million. But here's another point. Wouldn't that make the government a leaner, more efficient? They wouldn't be able to splurge on nonsense the way they do right now.
Yeah, much more.
Right now, they replace their furniture every
like
2
the Iraq War.
Yeah, exactly, and that would be a way to vote on war, wouldn't it? Can we get some money for war, please? And if the Americans wouldn't pony up the money, then they would have to send a smaller force, or just nuke them instead, or figure something out. So it would be a way to.
The thing is, I'm into that. Everybody could vote on whether we be taxed, but the minority that loses the vote gets taxed too. You just can't let it be voluntary, because I know there is free riders.
Special interest.
I know that. My life experience tells me that's real.
Okay,
but they would be a minority. They wouldn't be the majority.
Yeah.
So, can I say one? Can I interject
sounds like
one?
A matter of faith.
If you read Atlas Shrugged, you'll find that 99% of humanity are hangers-on or scabs.
Well, that's the one I did read, but yeah.
John Galt and Hank Rearden are productive, and virtually nobody else is. And if they are productive, it's by virtue of John Galt and Hank Rearden's innovation.
Well, that's not quite fair, because the railroad is sprinkled throughout with hard workers of every level that just want a good place to work at and a good manager that isn't they're ready to work hard. But
all right, before we hit that, let's let someone else chime in on the thoughts we were just doing.
Can I say one thing?
Yes, go ahead.
And
Hey, this is one.
I admit that guy was right. I talk too much, but still, he's a jerk. Okay.
So I just wanted to make one point, just to throw a thought out there, that in a free society or a minarchist state or in an objectivist state, where the government's funded voluntarily, I think there was concern about who would, people that don't want to pay for protection or couldn't afford it. I think, one thing here, in this society, everything would be privately owned, right? All property would be privately owned. So it would, the owners of the property would probably be the ones that mostly are the ones that pay for the security of that property. and because it's in their interest to keep their property value high and not have criminals walking around and rapists walking around on it. And if they choose, they could require the people that rent on their property to pay them money to help pay for that. So I don't necessarily think that's really a challenge, and I think that the overall money that would need to be paid for a minarch estate would be so low that it would probably be much less than what poor people pay in income taxes today anyway. So, I mean, I can't prove that on an Etch-a-Sketch right now, but I'm guessing it's probably true.
Well, like the government would have to protect the rights of the people, and the government couldn't just claim ownership on the land. They would have to develop that land in order to claim ownership.
Right.
So
I'm
I don't.
privately owned land here.
Oh yeah, in private, yes. Okay.
But I'm saying the people that own
public
land privately would probably take a lot of responsibility for paying for property rights enforcement on their land and contract enforcement on their land. So they would want to pay the government, because that's one of the rules, is that or one of the stipulations. If you don't, you can choose to pay the government or not, because it's voluntary. But if you don't pay it, the court's not going to enforce your contracts or necessary, but the owners of all the land would probably want their contracts to be enforced.
Now, I think that's a dangerous road to go down, because then you could just cause financial problems for a company. The company couldn't pay for protection, and then you could go rob them, and nothing could be done. So I think that the police have to be they have to show up on the scene and find out who hit who or who shot who, and nothing else, pardon me, but that crime itself can be their question, I think. So I think that's a dangerous road to go down, and that's why we have to have a blanket voluntary payment. Everyone just voluntarily pays into the whole big government pot and gets the same protection as everybody else. And if you want different or better protection, like armed guards in a gated community, that's your prerogative. If you want to have a gun in your house, that's your prerogative. But the government shouldn't play favorites, I don't think, depending on who can or has paid.
Well, that's an interesting point.
So, yeah. I don't know if we need to say more on that. Does anyone want to say more on what we've said there?
But
go ahead.
How the government would provide such a service to ensure that they will give equal attention to everyone, not the ones that are paying?
They can't. They'll just do their damn best, and they're incompetent. So make sure you have a gun at your house.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I think the police and the justice system is just for extreme cases, or in situations when you have to go to court, or in stuff like that, not for everyday problems, I think.
Yes, and I think that it's more of a deterrent than a cure after the problem, because it's supposed to deter the problem from occurring. After the problem's occurred, it's a damn mess. So, whether it's a person who's embezzled money from a store, or it's a rape, or whatever it is, once the problem's occurred, it's a huge problem, and you've got to spend all this money and prosecutors and all this, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. Whereas if you can just prevent it by just knowing that all someone has to do is get on the phone and say he raped me, and then 5 minutes later police will surround the house. If you understand that, then you don't do the rape to begin with. So it is a matter of deterrence, not a matter of how competent they are after the fact. They are incompetent. So have a gun, and don't get drunk and walk around in a miniskirt alone at night in a big city.
That has nothing to do with it.
That's everything. That's the whole point.
No, because rapists also rape old women. So the idea that it has something to do with how attractive the woman is.
Yeah, I don't think it's good to blame, for example, a crime on the victim. For example, like the girl wearing a miniskirt or something.
No, I'm not blaming it on her. But what I'm saying is that in a free society, you wouldn't. It would be stupid of you to go walk around like that and get raped and then say I should have been safer, because okay, but you weren't, and so have a fucking brain.
Brandon, that has nothing to do with it. There's no reason to show that rapists have any concern about how attractive their victims are before they, choose.
Look, drunk women in mini skirts get raped, all right?
Well, but so do old women in old women dresses, and so do basically everyone.
All right, you're taking a D-type mentality to everything I say.
I'm not taking a D-type mentality. I actually study these things, and there appears to be no connection between the two.
All right, you're taking a D-type mentality.
I think
disintegrate it.
I'm not taking.
I think that we would have to increase security in places where women couldn't walk around with mini skirts. I think we would have to do that, but I also agree that you shouldn't walk around in a bad neighborhood.
Well, if they do, they can if they want to. That's fine. Maybe they're a hooker and they want to, and that's their business. But they should carry a pistol, and they can't go around and scream afterwards. Well, they can call the police, but the thing is, I'm saying the police will deal with it afterwards, and the police are incompetent. So use your damn brain. Don't go around talking to your neighbors how you just won the lottery and have drawers full of cash in your house, and then you get robbed and you're surprised. You say, I should be safe in my house. Yes, you should, but you're also a fucking idiot.
No, because that doesn't make them thieves. Well,
I think it's nobody's business who you have sex with or how you have sex with it, but the toys you use, those are somebody's business, and I understand it's quite lucrative.
The what?
What?
Sorry, just changing the.
There are legal controls on that shit in America, and just toys for that purpose, lumps of plastic for that purpose. It's hilarious.
Yeah, that's the point.
It's like $50 for a lump of plastic because it's shaped for that purpose instead of $5 for the virtually the same lump of plastic if it's in the shape of a soccer ball that's used.
Exactly. They say how you have sex is nobody's business, but if you use sex toys, then it is somebody's business. It's just a matter of fact. That was my point.
Well, if there was voluntary
and it's quite lucrative.
If there was voluntary taxation, there'd be no need for any of that nonsense.
Well, you make me want to think about it because I do have a science fiction brain, and even things that I go, oh, and that's not realistic, I have a way of being able to put it there. And I could imagine that when you're talking about war, for example, that used to be how it was. We don't have the rich people anymore, but there were taxes on rich people that were somewhat voluntary, in the sense that the rich people got a say in doing it, to go to war. And this is pre-democratic times, but I believe even in democratic countries this has happened. But in pre-democratic times, everybody has to pony up those soldiers and the money and the food and all that, and therefore, they might have been happy to go to war some silly times, but they did have to think twice about it. At least they were risking their own, instead of just risking other people's money, risking yourself. Now, would people do that in order to fund the schools? I guess if you're part of the idea is that the government would be so good, people would be eager to give it money.
The schools are a business. First of all, you're going to have to get your head around the fact that 90% of what you call the government is now not anybody's problem. It's up to the citizens. We're only talking about this little teeny sliver of 10%. Soldiers, police, and judges. That's it.
Well, the thing is, I just,
The schools would be like it is right now. There would be private.
The thing is, I believe in universal coverage of things.
The doctor's offices would be like they used to right now. Nobody cares about your neighbor's doctor bill. Used to be if somebody on the street they could all chip in $1 and help to pay for their cast. But now we see
that happened.
They'll pay for it. Just contact your local social security office or whatever.
You think in the old days, people with broken arms, the community just always chipped together to do it? That's not what happened.
Yes, the churches ran doctors' offices and things. So
yeah, a lot of people fall through the cracks. Some things should be universal, and basically infrastructure. If it's going to be infrastructure, then it needs to be universal.
More people fall through the cracks of the state when the state's running it.
Well, our lifespan is longer than ever has been before, unless people seem to be less elderly or homeless than were before Social Security, and so I don't think the evidence. That's an opinion, but I don't see the evidence.
It's not because of Social Security. It's because the medical science have evolved. If it weren't for that, we would
Well,
be
if you don't have money to use the medical science, then you don't get to use the medical science. So the fact that more people get to use the medical science is Social Security and Medicaid and a lot of other programs that don't catch everybody, obviously, and a lot of them are counterproductive programs. But the idea that we shouldn't have programs, no, we should fix broken programs. Like, for example, I don't want to give any checks away just because you have a kid. I believe everything should be in the form of a job program.
Yeah, like, or for example, in associations in the community where everyone can chip in, or poor people. I think we would have we'd have that sort of thing, but I think the market would take care of the.
But why don't country clubs work that way, that everybody can chip in or not?
What?
Well, because
why does a country club that's kept immaculately, I don't know of any nice place that works that way. I only know shitty places that work that way.
Well, maybe because the people that run those shitty places are shitty.
No, wait, that's not true. Linux works that way, and Linux is pretty nice.
Yeah, exactly.
How does Linux work?
Take cyberspace. Yeah.
Government labor. That's labor that people are giving.
So it's still money. Well, it's still their time or still their effort or whatever.
I'm not saying people can't volunteer their time or that that's not a good thing.
How is that different than money?
Charities do a lot, and they wouldn't.
Time different than money.
The point is that
I know it's not the same, but
would be moral. Like, there would be no initiation of force, there would be no abuse, and those things would be highly illegal.
You guys have to negotiate from a position of realizing that you've already had ancestors agree to pay taxes. If you're in the U.S., I'm not talking about other countries with their own histories of agreements, though there's a lot of similarities and differences country by country. In the United States, because when you sign a contract, you're expected to keep it. Why do you keep asking that, Leo? When you sign a contract, you're expected to keep it. And if the rights of that contract go to your children, they have to keep it, or they get out of the contract. That's how contracts work.
My ancestors came from Texas and Virginia where they had slaves. So now what are you going to do? I mean,
I already made this distinction if you want to drill into the details, but first the broad argument is most people in the United States, ancestors came after the Constitution. They signed up for how it worked, and if they were here before that, they were a part of making the Constitution. So those two groups are covered. Now you have Native Americans.
Individuals are sovereign.
Yes, meaning they can go into agreements, right? They can go into contracts. One of the sovereign rights is you can freely go into a contract. Right. And that's what immigrants have done.
No.
Why is the
No, immigrants didn't do that. Yes, they did. They actually signed a piece of paper saying they agreed to the Constitution. So you could keep saying no, they didn't, but they actually literally did.
What if they did? I don't see how that
did. What if you agreed to pay your house loan and then there's still half of it is due when the child inherits it? Do they have to pay the loan or do they just get the house for free? It is a house loan. It's a contract. It is a contract that to be a citizen and get the rights of citizenship, you agree to the Constitution, which includes the right of the government to levy taxes. And your remediation against that is you get to vote.
It's not a business contract. It's fundamentally different.
So you're saying that when immigrants come to the United States, they don't have to sign a piece of paper saying that they will be loyal to the Constitution and not... Well, you obviously don't care much for agreements. So, right, you don't care about the piece of paper. Why should I care about you wanting to change the system when you won't even commit to keeping an agreement that's already been made? So I should make an agreement with you about how to change the system because you won't keep that agreement. I can tell that right now. You won't keep your agreement. You won't keep your agreement with me if I change the system the way you want.
That's why there's a free press.
Well, one thing is,
What's not how what works? Immigration?
well, that
Does
so-called
immigration work the
agreement.
way I said? Does immigration work the way I said? Do immigrants have to agree? In the United States, there's a swearing in, and you have to swear allegiance to the United. In the United States, there's a swearing in. Well, I don't care. I don't care about you and what you want in the country either. So we don't care. So that's why I don't like talking to you.
I muted him. What's going on? Why is
Guys, take it easy.
I don't
You guys
care
are-
what you care about or not. I don't care either. So now we don't care. Great, and let you bring up Nazis and how you don't care. You're really great for the conversation.
How do you guys still hear him? I muted him. I can't hear him.
I can hear him.
I can hear it.
Ron has overcome the mute.
Give him command, MrCropper.
I just found a special button. There we go. All right.
They're counter
Yeah,
arguments, but
so
one of them is not. Who
as-
cares?
As I was saying, like the agreement that you're talking about in immigration, that you have to follow certain things when you immigrate to a country, that agreement is not valid because it's made under duress. It's not something. It's not something voluntary. You have to make that agreement in order to live in that country, and you don't necessarily agree to it. You know.
Too bad.
Yeah, but that's not right. So
Decisions are hard in life.
that's not legitimate.
No, it is right. It is right. You came to our country in distress, wanted our help, and now you're going to tell us how it works? Sorry, no thanks.
Well, not really. Well, I could tell you if something is wrong or not. I think that's
Sure.
that's valid.
You get a vote. I think we've been pretty generous with the immigrants.
Come on. A vote is a far cry for any control.
I don't know what you expect. If you expect dictatorial decision-making powers, no deal.
No. I would expect direct democracy. You would vote with your feet. You would vote with your money. You would vote with your thoughts.
Vote with your feet. Isn't that
Yeah.
what I said, that you can leave the country? Isn't that voting with your feet? Isn't that what voting with your feet means? Is that if you don't like the deal that you've taken, you're allowed to break the deal, but you got to leave? Isn't that voting with your feet?
What I mean is you know, you choose to participate in the whatever program the government is running. If you don't want to participate, so you can just opt out. So.
Well, believe me, I think we should maximize that. Like, if you don't want to drive on the roads, you don't have to pay the car taxes, road taxes. I believe we should maximize that. But it can't be a universal thing. There's various examples of where I don't think it can be a universal thing, because I want everybody to be able to get an education. I don't want freeloader parents that figure they can save some money by not educating their kids because they don't really care about their kids' future. That's not in my best interest. So, but mostly I would definitely like to maximize that kind of thing. And that's why I'm saying I see the charm and the reality, the realisticness of volunteer taxation, so-called, in some cases. And we do see examples of that, or towns create parks. The state maybe the city gives half, and they say, hey, if we'll give matching funds, however much you can raise, and that does work some cases.
Yeah, and also realize that there are ways to convince people and not use violence. There are ways to persuade people to do things without violence. So.
Yeah.
That's why we would have the free press, so even if things work, you didn't have to move out of your state. You could stay in your state and change it.
There are some people that you can't convince except with violence, though, that I believe.
And that's what the jail...
Yeah, exactly. When they actually do something to someone, we won't put people in jail for victimless crimes, Well,
I don't. Yeah, that's the part where I'm libertarian. I don't believe in the victimless crime is an oxymoron. Shouldn't be a crime.
Well, as long as we have tax law, we're going to have some place in the jails for tax evaders. Are you happy about that?
Well, I believe in a land tax, and if somebody doesn't pay their land tax, they don't go to jail. You just take their land.
Well, that's a way to denude society. If they just raise
so you say, but it sounds better than jail, and
just raise the land tax enough, and you've created paupers out of everyone in society.
Yeah, I don't think that's the goal of my style of government, though. I like to optimize the infrastructural performance, ideally. So I don't plan to just use this to destroy everybody, because that's my real goal.
That's what ends up happening with these systems. I mean, look at political correctness. Everyone said, no, we're just trying to be polite. And now they're destroying society with it.
So all systems, including yours. Including yours. Your voluntary system would be subject to the same laws then.
Yes, and that's why the Second Amendment.
So if your system doesn't work, the fallback, gunfight. Sounds like my system.
Obviously.
Sounds a lot like my system, Mr. Cropper.
What else is there?
No, seriously, it's like, let's all cooperate. It can work out, and fallback, gunfight.
Yeah, if it doesn't, I have a gun, and we'll see what happens. Yeah. What else can you do that's really, really
well, I'm a Second Amendment liberal, so...
You make the best case you can, and then have a gun.
I think if I could just make one point here, we're focusing a lot on politics, but I don't think any political system can actually solve our problems or make society better for today. I think we have to fight for better philosophy and better ideas, sort of from the ground up. And then, if we have a good government on top of that, we'll manage it properly. But if we don't have good, philosophy underneath it, even the best government in the world isn't going to help. It's just
very true.
I totally agree. And
Another
not just
question,
good people, but good character. Not just good philosophy, but like people of good character. People of good character can make a kingship work. They can make a principality work. So it's really the good character of the people, which is hopefully philosophy.
I think.
I totally agree. But how do you get good character without good philosophy?
No, it's the same thing. I agree. It's the same thing. Yeah, I'm just expanding.
The stability of our governments. So sure, if we made some wonderful, like let's take the U.S. Constitution, fairly decent document, but it didn't last, did it? There's this sliding. There's this movement for government to take over more and more things. I think an interesting question is, how do we keep things stable? How do we keep government in its place? Because it seems like every country in the world has slid.
Yeah. Well, what do you think, though? Are you more cyclic, like the Buddhist idea is more cyclic and there isn't progress? I kind of believe there's progress, but it's a cyclic progress, and there's boom and bust, which we can, minimize, but some of that's natural. And so there's a cycle, but I believe in progress. But, like the Buddhist version is just cycle, no actual progress. The progress is all illusions as it spirals around a big wheel. Where do you stand?
Progress is on that plot, the Kurzweil plot, a very depressingly impersonal plot.
Well, yeah, right. I could guess you believe in true progress.
It sounds like the Buddhist thing, a zero-sum game progress, and any progress we might make somewhere is harming us elsewhere, but I don't think that could be the case.
Me neither. That's where I split with Buddhists very strongly.
Our lives today are objectively better than the life of an ancient Egyptian.
Much better.
Like I don't think it can be argued.
Yeah. Even emotionally, or knowing your own, all physical things, life expectancy, but also emotionally. Also, how far can you travel? What can you see? What can a poor person even experience? And a lot of the things they're experiencing, even in Africa, is stuff that was, cloths that were just for the wealthy 150 years ago. As a liberal, I'm not happy with that state, but there's still progress, you know what I mean? Or a good example, what's his name? Anyway, the statistic is like 100 years ago, maybe it was 150, no nation had a life expectancy over 40 years. and now no nation has one below 40 years. Well, 40 years is kind of short, but yeah, that's pretty good, actually.
We may be in a bit of a golden age. It may slide back a bit.
Well, I think there's secret curves, like the bronze ones, or the adoption of the internet that secretly go up all the time, and those I think are the actual important ones. And then there's probably ones like that are declining, you know, and those would be important. But then a lot of the ones that are cycling, those I think are just kind of the illusion. You know, the collapse of this company or that big news thing, and they're important to us as individuals, but really they don't affect these bronze curves.
Yeah, you know, the collapse of companies is less of a problem than it's made out, because all of the resources that were tied up in that company are absorbed by companies that are actually profitable.
Well, right, or like, for example, a good example was it Qualcomm that built all this fiber optic at the end of the dot-com? They did like a couple billions, I think 10 billion of laying fiber optic right at the wrong time. They collapsed. Oh no, what are we going to do with the fiber optic? We're going to use it. A guy's going to buy it 20 cents on the dollar, you know? And it's sad, but they made their bet, and guess what? The people that owned Qualcomm got rich off of it. So they failed to keep getting rich, but they got super rich off of it, and all the employees that worked there for 20, you know what I mean? So was it a failure? No. It's just like one day you wake up and the relationship's over. It doesn't actually mean it wasn't a good relationship, or in the case of a business, you know, profitable.
Yeah, so the economic chaos of freedom doesn't bother you as much as I thought it might. You sound okay with it.
I am, but it's also why I think to have individual freedom, we need some kind of safety nets, and we could be a lot more clever than we are now. I don't want a dependency state. I prefer job programs. I prefer the most clever, natural, least, you know, we can do a lot better. But I want to have a kind of safety net because, like, you know, I have some relatives that were really wealthy. They've been very generous in their life. They're very conservative. And the business he had, you know, its day is over. And so instead of making $3 million a year, you know, and they're hardworking people. So now they're working at these tour places and driving Uber, and it's amazing how resilient they are. But I don't want them to have a medical crisis and not. If they were still rich, they could pay for themselves. If they're not as rich, then I believe in a fallback for them or people that were poor their whole life. Either way,
okay.
And just because then you can let businesses collapse, right? You can just go buy GM. Well, because you know people will buy the factories, the people will be out of work 6 months, and instead of them dying from it, you know, they'll get back to work.
What if it's the case that 80 or 90% of the cost of medical care now is government ownerity? The government causing problems. So if we had a free system, not only would the bills be a lot smaller, but then there would be things like your local parish or church or your local medical aid society or the town medical aid society or etc. The prices would be so much drastically lower.
The only truth to that, to me, is that governments have colluded and sold out to businesses. For example, Medicaid can't negotiate the price of prescription drugs. By law, they're not allowed to. Otherwise, they're such a huge buyer, they would get a much better price like every other medical organization, government organization in the world, and it would still be profitable to the companies.
Look, that is
so that I blame on the private businesses, right?
No, come on, that's the government's fault. That is the history of every single government intervention program going back as far. I can think of examples back into when they said the railroads are charging too much for freight, and it wasn't.
Why does the government want to?
Now listen. What happened when they set up this thing that said the railroads have to be fair to farmers because only one railroad track goes through a county, so that railroad has to be fair. The railroads took over those government commissions and raised rates instead of lowering them. So there's your protection of the people through these stupid commissions and laws and stuff. There it is. Yeah, and that's what they do with the Islamic Council of France that was set up to moderate mosques and make sure the mosques weren't doing naughty things. The Muslims took over that council. The people who are interested in that council's actions are the ones who are going to infiltrate and take it over. Businesses will take over these because otherwise they can't survive. Otherwise,
Right,
the council
that's
will destroy it.
true, Brandon. That's true. But on the other side, when there wasn't fair railroad rules, fair use rules, basically, then you had railroads taking over all of the businesses that depended on railroads, and lumber companies, oil companies, mining companies, where the railroad would just be one railroad, and they had a means to take stuff over. And you know how you were saying that people will take advantage of the weaker party, so that's what they did.
Well, I would say that freedom is not perfect. It's a mess. It's a pell-mell, humble-tumble, and it's the worst system that there is, except for every other system, which all require physical force. So freedom is just the system of nobody gets to force anybody to do anything. You have to convince them voluntarily. And you're right. It would be a fucking mess. You're right.
Well,
Jason, what did you want to interject there?
You talking to me?
Yeah, I thought you said something. I thought you hadn't made a comment.
No, just to reiterate your point, not only set up those organizations, government regulatory organizations, not only do companies who have an interest in them get control of them, but they have to, because if they don't, their competitors will. So it's not even like optional. You know.
It becomes a matter of life and death. Either you get into that that lobbyist group, or else you die. Yeah.
Exactly. It's not even that these are bad people.
Well, I'm just saying, before you had the regulation, you had an alternate corruption. So the problem is complicated. You can't just jump from the fire into the frying pan and back and forth. It's like, how do we word things? It's a philosophical problem. How do we word and think things so that, like, I think the libertarian society you want will work once everybody has good character. We could start by trying to get rid of Justin Bieber and teach good character, and then people would be ready to just be sensible about it. And go, I care about schools, I'll give. Hey, I care about that, I'll give. People do. I've been in situations people that do that, but we're not there.
So you're saying we have to have...
No system won't make people that way.
One of your minimums is universal education. Well, what if I said you're going to have to grow up and throw that out?
Why? Why would I have to do that?
You don't get to have it. Right,
well, we're negotiating, and if you tell me I can't have it, what do I get? What you're trying, like, let's pretend this is a negotiation where there is a constitution in this country. We're talking about a constitutional convention, and I'm supposed to decide whether I want to vote for you because it'll be worthwhile somehow. Why is it worthwhile? I think uneducated people make towns shitty, and the more educated, the better the town's going to be.
Okay, so I have two things to say. First of all, we do have free public education right now. It's neither free, it's very, very expensive, nor is it education, because the people can't read when they get out of high school.
Nothing's free.
And the people can't read when they get out of high school. So it's a disaster. What's that, Jason?
And they're voting for Bernie Sanders, even worse.
Yeah, we've created a nation of Bernie Sanders voters with
public education. Literacy has gone up under public education.
I don't know if it's higher than it was.
Ability to, but not comprehension.
Well, that's hyperbolic, because I agree that high school students seem pretty stupid these days, but they actually do know how to read mostly.
Okay, now, so what if some kid gets to the age of 18 and can't read? That's the situation we have right now. 30% of them can't. But what it would be is people would have homeschools. They would have the little red house at the corner where everyone from 5-year-olds to 15-year-olds are all learning to read all in the same room. So you would have it solved one way or the other. And some people would have very, very good educations, and some people would eat ketchup sandwiches for lunch.
14% literacy, according to what Google brought up.
There you go. I don't know. It was like 97% literacy in the late 1800s, and we were dealing with immigrants from dozens of different...
No, I don't think that's true.
Well, no, it's probably like 60% literacy rate. But it wouldn't change my case. Because a
lot of those immigrants weren't literate in their own languages, if I recall correctly.
Right, and they came
So it's not really fair, and you didn't necessarily have to be literate in that sense, because we're in a society now where so-called literacy matters a lot more than it did even 100 years ago.
Okay, but
it didn't matter, right? You could go in every agreement. People didn't think you were an idiot in every way. You didn't. Right. There were probably wealthy people that weren't literate, but mostly they were.
Now, so it's even more of a tragedy that the government's taken it over and failed so dismally. But to go more to your point, you say, why do I take that off the table? Why do I say you can't have that? You cannot put in the Constitution that everybody gets a job, or that everybody gets food every day, or that everybody gets a house, or that everybody gets an education. You don't get to put that in there because that is not under your control or anybody's control. That is under the control of the people who provide that service. So you don't get to enslave those people. They are free and they are their own sovereign entities. The only thing you can tell people is what they cannot do to others. That's it. That's the end of your duties as the government.
What I'm curious about is, in what way is the government not actually already like the military came, stole land, and they did blah blah blah, and they let all these people in this area that they took control of sign up, but basically at the get-go, the military, you know, pre-government people that created the American government via the revolution, they own all the land like a private organization, and we have to pay a fee just like a you know, country club. What's the difference, really? Just words.
Well, right now they have laws against things like smoking.
In other words, but imagine this. I'm saying, imagine that the people that run the United States just pretend it's a government. And really, they're a private organization. They've said it's for the people as a sales technique, but in reality, they just own it and they tell us what we're going to do. We pay the fee or we leave. And leaving wasn't that easy, but it's easy now for an American. So there's no real difference. It's just that they want to call it for the good of the people. And we should just take advantage of that and make it actually for the good of the people.
Well, how do you propose to do that? If I grant your whole metaphor, I'm not sure how far it gets you. How do you propose to do things that it would actually be for the good of the people? Are you a socialist Bernie Sanders guy?
You know what that is.
Well, but the way I see that particular thing, I'm saying, if it was privatized, we could vote for the CEO, vote for your company's CEO. We get to vote for our CEO, and that's an advantage. That's better than if it was the same people privatized. The rich people that run our current government would buy all the stuff and run it, and they just wouldn't have to pretend to be beholden to our votes. They would still try to placate us because they would know we could, you know, rabble-rouse.
Okay, I have to return to the point earlier that these things are not as stable as you think. Up come Microsoft and Apple and Tesla, and suddenly you have to play by their game.
Yeah.
And so suddenly they have, if you think that money just is going to corrupt and buy everything all the time, you're not ever going to be safe in a free economy, because there's always going to be a new guy who was in his garage 10 years ago, and now he has the Air Force. So the only thing you can do is to stop people from buying it. You cannot allow it to be bought. This is government operation, these things. Okay. And all else that is not concerning guns.
Grant, let's focus.
Go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt. Sorry. I was just saying, let's focus. Could we focus on this example? The United States has a lien on every piece of property in the United States. Basically, that's the taxation lien. We're going to tax every piece of property.
I'm against taxation, so I'm not sure what you want me to.
That means if a private organization owned a use lien instead of the government, right? There is no competition. Apple cannot rise up.
Hey, how would they own a use lien?
Right now, that's the question for you in the following way, which is, if the United States government right now does have those liens on every piece of property, and like 40% of the property in the West, it's got a lot of actual property too, that gets sold to private interests if we privatize the government, correct?
Yeah. No, I don't care. I don't know.
Government property.
Look, it's not.
How do you distribute? Let me ask you this: how do you distribute government property? It is material because this is going to tell me the starting. You give it all to me, all that property, the government's property to me. I'm totally for it.
I'll tell you what. You just have a slightly disintegrated view of the thing. I mean, you're looking at 1,000 different little things and saying, how would we iron out this and that and the other? Well, listen. The government would handle things involved with guns. Other things like who owns that piece of land or whatever wouldn't be a problem because the government doesn't tax things. So all of these problems that have your panties in a bunch would evaporate.
No, but specifically, the government actually owns a lot of land, right? In the West, it owns like 40-some% of the land.
Well,
it owns land right all over. So to privatize, what happens to that land? And it's not a trick question. It's like just what happens to it. It's not held by the government. It's not a gun thing, so they sell it, right?
Well, so what? That is not going to change the nature of governance. Whether the government has 40 acres of land doesn't matter.
Whoever owns all that land, there's no way an Apple is going to rise up and suddenly own that land because land doesn't work that way. Land doesn't work like other property.
Well,
doesn't work like wealth. That's the whole Henry George thing, is that land is a fundamental category separate from all other wealth. Blackberries, printing presses, your shoes, your shirts, those all fit as wealth. Land...
It's just capital. It's just a factor of production.
Why is that? Is it because land is space?
Yeah, basically, in there you can't make more and you don't affect the supply. For example, he points out anything else you tax, you retard the supply. So you're taxing something people want and you're going to retard the supply and demand. That's natural. You'll make more or less of them, usually less. They try to do tax incentives. That doesn't work as well. But when you tax luxury yachts, you get less luxury lots. That can't happen with land. Now, you can overtax the land and make it onerous so it's not profitable to use the land, but you could do accounting, mathematics to find out where that point is and not even go close to it. Yeah. So it's possible not to go close to it. So if you don't want to be onerous, you can be rest assured that you can take a certain taxation from land and there'll still be as much land.
Look, Pyrrho, let me try to put your mind at ease a little bit on this. In Britain right now, they have these national talk shows where they have the people in the audience ask questions. And I recently saw one where they spent 15 minutes discussing the fact that some people make doctor's appointments and then they miss their doctor's appointments. And that's a huge problem because it's like 680,000 a year or something.
Oh, I know. I hate it when I do that.
That is not something that we discussed on national TV. It's not something that is a priority. It will be soon if Obamacare keeps going.
Well, I agree with you in there.
You are in this position with taxation. You are nitpicking stupid little idiotic side issues which are beneath your notice as an intellectual. And you need to get them off your mind and realize that the government should not tax. No. It should be a voluntary situation. And you would get more sleep at night and you would look better.
I get a lot of sleep. I wouldn't look better. I'm growing old. But okay, point taken. But you have to also give me, whether I'm right or wrong or crazy, I believe land is a fundamental component of economy, distinct from wealth and capital and labor.
Crazy.
It's obviously like you're not making any more of it. It's not like shoes or iPhones or anything.
They make it. What do you mean? In New York City, they make acres and acres and acres of it. Depends on what you like.
No, land filling out of the ocean. The ocean is just
No, I'm talking about the skyscrapers. I'm talking about the skyscrapers.
No, that doesn't matter. We're not talking. You don't. Henry George is that the skyscraper is wealth.
QED.
We're talking about the land it needs to be on.
Suddenly, you can't distinguish between the wealth of the skyscraper and the land it's on because they're manufacturing more wealth that is land that is wealth that is land. So
no, but that's a lot of people say that. But for example, in Maine, if you look up the deeds, every piece of land, the unimproved property is given a value, and the house, the improvements are given a value. They actually assessors separate that. And for example, if a building burns down in New York, it's not like, oh my gosh, we tore down the building. How much is the empty land worth? They have a ways of figuring that out.
Right, for taxation purposes.
No. For selling the empty land after a building burns down, they know how much it's worth to buy, that what people will buy. There is a market rate for that, even in New York. So that accounting it's actually some of the most trustworthy people we still have in our society is, accountants. The bell curve, the bulk of them just freaking do math right.
Listen, Pyrrho, do you know the three types? There are three personalities. There's the cook and her kitchen staff that talk about people, what Susan did and what Joe did. And then there's the car mechanic who talks about the new type of engine in the car, and they talk about things, which is sort of middle. And then there's the upper class who talk about theories and ideas. And we should be careful not to talk too much about things, because it should be fairly beneath the notice of people who can deal with abstractions.
Then let's talk about Nietzsche then. How about that?
Nietzsche might be better than whether or not...
You know what? I'm going to go try to make sure my wife stays in love with me. And I'll talk to you guys later.
All right. Okay. So on Nietzsche, we were at... is there something anyone want to jump in on what we were saying, or should I just go with where we were and go forward?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
All right.
I was just looking at the introduction here. I've got Beyond Good and Evil, Penguin Classics here, and I was just looking in the introduction, and it was making a few little points about Nietzsche in many of his works, like The Birth of Tragedy and Zarathustra and stuff, and it says here that Nietzsche regards anyone as a philosopher who subscribes to a system of values. And then later on he says that Nietzsche claims that the faith in antithetical values is the fundamental faith of the metaphysicians. Antithetical values. That's something we could talk about.
The faith in antithetical values. Now, can you screen share and put that up so I can read over it, or what can happen?
No.
Or can you read it? Is it not on your screen?
On my book.
Could you read it one more time?
Yeah, he says, well, I'll read a couple sentences of the paragraph. So he says, to want truth and begin searching for it, we need to have confidence in our capacity to find it, to recognize it when we encounter it. What gives us this confidence? It is, Nietzsche claims in section 2 of Beyond Good and Evil, the faith in antithetical values, that is, the fundamental faith of the metaphysicians.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess the reason that I can't figure out what he says is, what is the metaphysicians? Who are they?
I guess the people who came before him.
The people believe that reality has a nature?
Well, I
assume crazy
faith
wild
in antithetical values means that some values don't go together, and that there's a set way that we should be living. There's a system of values that is true and correct.
Okay, well, I don't know. I can't say enough about it because it doesn't sink into me. I don't know. Maybe if I read it, the whole section or something, I don't know. Speak to it more, Andrew, if you want, and convince me that it's more interesting than it seems on my first reading here.
Okay, well, I'll read this bit here. So it says, his real anxieties have to do with our readiness to take as truths things that for him manifestly aren't, thereby displaying the lack of refinement in our sense of truth. In addition, he is irritated by the dogmatism that insists that between the poles of truth, falsity, good, bad, and so on, there can be no fruitful connections. So it sounds like he's railing against absolutism, and he thinks there's some kind of middle ground.
Yeah.
He calls it dogmatism, if there's good and evil.
I guess dogmatism in the religious sense, maybe?
Is he talking about religion? Does he talk about people who believe in religion or in values as such? Dogmatism of values as such.
In his time, there were a lot of dogmatism regarding morality, in the religious sense.
Yeah, religion was still big. People still went to church. They took it seriously to much greater extent than today, at any rate.
I would argue that at that time, people had more common sense than today, because they were misintegrated, but at least they were integrated in some form. Nowadays, people are just all over the place. They don't know who they are. They have no principles.
Well, free government education is taking care of anybody having the ability to think.
Yeah.
So,
now.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I'll paraphrase this, but he's talking about the ancient Greek playwrights, and he says, I'll just paraphrase it. He says that Aeschylus and Sophocles had this worldview that of a kind of tragic heroism, that life is full of suffering, but it's still better to kind of try to defeat it and get on with ourselves. But then Nietzsche says that Euripides, who was also another Greek playwright, and Socrates, that he calls them villains, and he says that those two, Euripides and Socrates, contrived the suicide of tragic drama through their purveying of optimistic rationalism, in teaching that virtue is knowledge, and that we therefore err through ignorance alone. And by saying that, from Socrates and Euripides changing the philosophy to this optimistic rationalism, they deprived their culture, so the ancient Greeks, of its greatest insight, that the more we know about reality, the more frightful we realize that it is. And thus they inaugurated the period of decadence.
Well, that's interesting. It certainly occurred at the same time, but decadence probably had other causes than that particular aptitude.
Yeah.
But like the decadence in the Greeks' time was due to the fall of the Roman Empire, right?
Well, Greece was before Rome.
Yeah. I mean, yes, exactly. I mean, I would say that Rome was a half-ass version of the Greek culture, and then it fell.
Yeah, that's basically true. A half-assed, but more bureaucratic. It's like they learned how to do bureaucracy better, but everything else not quite as good.
That would be a good title of a book about Rome, about the Roman Empire.
Yeah, I think
and today we're sort of like a half-ass version of the culture of the Enlightenment, because we were losing those values today, I think.
I can read a bit more of that bit too. So he says, the next part is, he says that the situation went from bad to worse in Nietzsche's view. For what in Socrates was merely a belief that reasoning could lead us to virtue-inducing wisdom, became in the hands of his perversely brilliant pupil Plato a completely worked-out system, which, whatever its author may have thought about it, was regarded by Nietzsche as the hideous perfection of optimism in its positing of a world more real than this one, a world immune to change and thus to decay and death.
Oh, that was definitely the idea that Socrates and the Greeks had, which is that if you understood that people basically do not act immorally on purpose. They do so only in ignorance. They don't understand that if they only understood philosophy better, or understood what they were really doing by their actions, they would not take those actions.
Do you believe this to be the case?
I don't think they're correct.
I think, yeah. I think just in a fundamental level, because you could say that evil people are ignorant, but at the same time, sometimes they know they are wrong. Maybe on a, they feel like like they would feel guilty about it, but in reality they don't know, they don't actually know why they're wrong. They might think they're right.
They might even know that they are wrong and still do it. I mean, what about the Bernie Madoff, who obviously knew what he was doing was complete and utter fraud and continued to do it for years and decades?
I think people like Bernie Sanders and Obama and people like that,
No,
I think they know. Yeah, and him, for example, I think they don't care about the actual the systems that they are advocating. They know those systems are wrong. What they care about is about exploiting the people, about fooling them into giving them power and money.
No, I'm talking about Bernie Madoff, who ran a pyramid scheme worth $40 billion or whatever, and he would take people's money in one end and pay investors out the other end, and there was just a constant funnel that got bigger and bigger and bigger until he got caught and it collapsed. Now,
well, maybe he thought that he wouldn't get caught, that he would get more and more money and power, and that was that. So
well,
maybe he thought he had a chance.
after he was arrested, he did say that it was a sense of relief because he's never, for the whole 40 years, he never slept well at night.
Yeah.
Corrupted.
Maybe he doesn't really care about his sleep. He just cares about his bank account.
Yeah, and it corrupted his family and his relationship with his wife and children. So
yeah, exactly. So in a way, you could say that they're ignorant of the whole situation, of the whole wider context. But yeah, I think evil in the world it's a sign that we're not evolved enough as a species.
no, I think evil is going to occur even if, like, I think Bernie Madoff knew exactly what he was doing, and I think that that's what the police are for, because we can never perfect our way out of it or educate our way out of it or be nice and not hit our kids. Stefan Molyneux thinks if we stopped hitting our kids, then there would be no physical violence with adults, and I don't think that's the case. So I think that we
but
a sandwich and we need a police force.
yeah, no doubt about that, because there will always be bad people, but I think more and more they'll turn into a minority, and their influence will be less and less as we mature as a society, I think. But I think evil will be always there, but I think its power will diminish as time goes on. Like for example, in the natural world, like we humans have much better quality of life than the other animals in the animal kingdom. So the evil is less for us, the evil of nature.
Why, Jason? Why do you say free will evasion?
Well, in response to Socrates' argument, or the Greeks in general, that knowledge is sort of the equivalent to knowledge or philosophical knowledge, be virtuous. I think what they did not factor in is free will. That just because I understand something or understand the long-range consequences of my actions doesn't mean that I will hold that in focus when I'm acting. I mean, people with, alcohol addictions are a good example of that. Maybe that's not a very good example, because that's kind of, maybe that's addiction is a whole other topic. But, I might have some kind of understanding philosophically that lying is bad for me, but I can also choose to ignore that knowledge. And I can focus on because I have free will, I can focus on different things. I can focus on a short-range benefit and kind of drop the context of what happens tomorrow. And because of that, knowledge is not enough. Somehow, at some level, there is a free will, and there's a choice that people just have to make to bring their knowledge into their decisions too. So I think that'll always be with us.
So if knowledge is not enough, what else would we need?
Choice. The choice to focus and use your knowledge.
Yeah, I think that there needs to be like a motivation for you to do those things. You know, you have to, the feeling to do those things has to be there. You know,
Well,
Well, I think
you need
if
a
you
heart
for if you
of what point you have to be.
like in a case, for example, the example that you mentioned, if you feel better drinking than actually thinking about not drinking, you won't stop drinking because emotionally you're not there, I think.
Right. Like I mean, like the burning. But alcoholic is an example, I guess. I don't know if I want to bring that in because maybe there's some weird brain chemistry going on too. But when they're drinking, they're not really thinking that, oh, I'm destroying my family, I'm making myself impotent, I'm killing my liver. They're kind of just, they're not thinking about all that, right? Like if somehow they could bring all those consequences and think about all that, they might make a different decision. But they're kind of like blocking that out of the. I mean, have you ever done anything that you were ashamed of or that you didn't want to, you knew it was wrong at the time, and did you notice that before you did it, you kind of blocked out things or you didn't think about certain things, you kind of evaded certain
Yeah,
things in order to get yourself to do it?
yeah. Like usually when I act like that, I come up with a rationalization or an excuse to do that thing, but you know,
YOLO.
Right.
yo.
Hey, Mr. Cropper,
Yeah.
chapter 4 of Beyond Good and Evil. Do you have that up?
Yes. Is it not showing?
I was just looking at it now. I think maybe we should talk about it though. When he says the falseness of a judgment is to us not necessarily an objection to a judgment. It is here that our new language perhaps sounds strangest. The question is to what extent it is life advancing, life preserving, etc. So he's saying that this question of some things we might pursue just because they're false, because it seems like they do have good outcomes, and even when we, have Santa Claus and like white lies like that, I'm curious whether it's not just that we're pursuing truth as a value, but maybe there's untruth that has some value too.
Yeah. What would an untruth that has value be unless it led you
Well,
to a truth?
even Nietzsche would say that some falsities are indispensable. So that's a strong word, right? Or at least the German equivalent.
Yeah, and the best we could probably do is say he's being a bit poetic. I mean, what could he possibly mean? I mean, why is it indispensable? Because it teaches you a truth of some kind. So,
Yeah, like what about the Santa Claus thing? So
okay. Yeah, so
presumably
is he saying
Santa Claus,
religion is that? Maybe?
maybe. Well, you've heard of like the opium of the masses thing, right? But presumably something like Santa Claus is taught to kids for them to do good things around Christmas time and what if somehow scientifically that could be shown to help with moral development or something? Would that then be a proper procedure for young development,
If
even if it's an untruth?
if pigs could fly, then we would live in a different world. So, um, that won't be found out to be the case because people are individual moral agents. So, you can't. We're not robots, and you can't manipulate us like that. And even if you do teach somebody everything about what's moral and right, they can then turn around and make another decision because they have free will. So,
Right. So let's say. So would you say then that many people need religion, otherwise they wouldn't act morally?
no, I would say religion overall is actually a very great corrupter, and causes immoral activity, um, and causes people to believe that morality is their enemy or the enemy of their happiness, and it causes all kinds of psychological corruption. Are you religious, or did you grow up religious?
See, the thing is, though, I thought we already agreed that there.
I lost everybody.
Yeah, you paused there, Andrew. I didn't hear you finish or whatever happened there.
Andrew has no sound right now, I think.
Yeah, Andrew, we did not hear you.
Guys hear?
Oh, okay. Well, we were waiting for. I think you were talking and we stopped hearing you in the middle of a sentence or something.
Yeah, I think my internet cut out for a second. I was saying that I thought a few Hangouts ago we accepted that objectivism would be always a minority point of view. It would never be something that the majority of people would accept.
Right.
So if that's the case, then what are the majority of people going to accept?
Well, I don't know, but if they steal from Walmart, Walmart will call the police and the police will prosecute them.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people.
It really, yeah, there's a lot, and we need to have a lot of jail cells if they are really going to rob that much. But also, while they're walking to Walmart to steal, they're going to walk past 15 help wanted signs because it's going to be a robust free economy. So they're going to have to make, you know.
I
think that's a good bottom line to have.
Sorry,
Say
go
again?
ahead. No, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, you said something. I didn't get that, the last part that you said.
Who, me?
Jason.
Jason, yeah, Jason, what did you say in there?
Oh, no, I just interjected that I think objectivism will actually be the dominant philosophy of the future. I just don't think the masses will study, you know, objectivist epistemology, but I think that they'll connect with, you know, cause and effect and egoism and capitalism and heroism and being the hero of your own life. I think that will, romantic realism in art, I think that will dominate.
I think we will end up teaching the public in more ways than we can appreciate right now, because who else is there, like as far as education goes, or defending us against the environmentalism? Only objectivists are out there. Or attacking quantum mechanic nonsense. Only the objectivists are out there. And so now we have Alex Epstein. Now, what happens when a fascist attacks an objectivist? It's different from what happens when they attack ExxonMobil. ExxonMobil says, all right, we'll forward our emails and we'll get a good lawyer. What does Alex Epstein do? So you guys know enough about that. That kind of stuff in the future is going... objectivists are going to be the ones that provide the intellectual muscle for that. The Tea Party is nothing but Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged plus 50 years.
Yeah, well, I think I'm more pessimistic about that. I kind of think that the human race seems to learn the hard way every time, and I don't suspect there's going to be we already are seeing us sliding to the left, right? So there's not going to be any revolution unless there's a collapse. So I'm more
like the libertarian party is gaining ground, so that could be a good sign, you know.
Yeah.
And
I don't know if that's a good sign.
well, at least they're after freedom, you know.
Yeah, I don't know
Some
about
things that
they pay lip service to it.
That's a good question.
Yeah,
actually.
at least that.
If I could ask all of you guys, have you seen anyone at the Ayn Rand Institute or anyone that's like a mainstream objectivist? What do they say about Hillary, Trump, Gary Johnson? What are they saying?
Well, the ARI is tax-free, whatever, so they can't endorse politics. They can't say anything.
Have you seen anyone though?
At least they could criticize Trump and Hillary. You know.
Yeah, they can't endorse. All I've seen is criticisms of Trump, and some of them I thought beyond the pale. But because, you know, like what kind of a society do you want to live in? If he gets 70% of the people's votes, I don't know. Like, so have a constitution, get a gun, but you can't. What do you want to do? Question 70% of the people? So I take slight exception to their exception to Trump. Of course he's not an angel. That's why we have a constitution. Of course he's not perfect, obviously. God help us if we ever get a perfect leader. Then what would we do?
I'm concerned.
Well, at least...
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, please. Yeah.
No,
Well,
go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. As I was saying, I think that it will be very bad for us if Hillary wins. I think that's my position. I
Yeah.
would prefer anyone, that is not Hillary,
Even
because she will continue what Obama is doing.
yeah.
She will keep giving arms to ISIS. She will keep the same global policy. So it will be a mess, for Europe and for the rest of the world.
Oh,
And I
Europe.
think and I think Trump will increase the security. I think that's the only positive thing that I'm seeing in him. That he will have a more aggressive stance against Muslims and you know.
All right, Jason, what were
I
you
don't
going to?
know. Well, just to play devil's advocate, and I don't want to derail this into politics, so please shut me up if I'm because I know we started out talking about Nietzsche. I don't know. We got to Hillary Clinton, but well, everything's connected. That's the problem. Everything is connected. So, we can get here in a second. No problem. So here's one argument. Hillary Clinton will be a better president than Barack Obama because she's not as extreme as him in terms of pure nihilism. She is, because she's a woman, she will feel that she has to prove herself as commander-in-chief, so she might be more aggressive than Donald Trump. I'm sorry, Obama. Now, that's pretty weak, I admit, because I'm even skeptical of that claim. But here's what concerns me about here's what concerns me about Trump. His talk is tough, but because he doesn't have any real principles that I can really see, all of his solutions are about reacting to consequences. And
Yeah, you're right.
he wants to basically weaken the Fourth Amendment and create more of a surveillance state. That's his method of dealing with terrorism. As if what Bush started wasn't enough. And whatever he does, and his economics are totally fascistic. I don't think anyone would support his economic policies here. But whatever he does, and this is true with any president, whatever powers he increases in executive will be handed off to the next president after him, which is probably going to be someone on the far left, probably a Bernie Sanders type. That's just my guess. It's a reaction against him. That could be disastrous. So I'm not convinced that he could actually do anything good because I don't know if he has the principles to know what to do. He's just going to be reacting to consequences, and his heart is probably in the right place. But Bush in the same way.
That's interesting
I
because
feel like Bush wanted to do the right thing, but I don't think he knew how to. And he just made things worse. And then he handed all those powers to Obama, who knew exactly what he's doing and hates American individualism and freedom.
It sounds like what you're saying is that Hillary Clinton could be an M and Trump would be a D, in the sense that at least we know where Hillary's going, but Trump is unstable and he'll do what he has to do in the moment, right?
Which will integrate into nothing, and then the people with the real integration will come in and take the powers he's increased and run with it.
Have they picked
Because
VP
disintegrated action can never move us to any purpose.
I could see Trump being D1 in that sense, but I'd say Hillary is M2, so I think that's much more dangerous.
Have they picked a VP yet?
I don't know what that is.
Somebody said Hillary's our BFF?
No. Have they picked vice presidents or running mates?
I don't think so. Not that I know of yet.
That's a scary thing.
Well, when do they? I think we'll learn something though when they pick their VPs.
Yeah,
No.
it'll be interesting. Palin is probably going to be with Trump.
No way. No, not gonna happen.
I think Trump will pick Rand Paul. Just joking. So,
I don't know why that guy had to come out every time with that crazy hair. I don't know what that was about. But did you hear that Romney? I don't know why Romney's coming back. He was terrible, but Romney endorsed. I think he endorsed Gary Johnson, Libertarian Party.
Wow.
I don't think that's going to help them, but
No.
I am totally opposed to Gary Johnson. You guys
Why?
might jump down the road.
he's a bit of a pragmatist too. Actually, Gary Johnson. He's not a principled libertarian.
No, libertarians.
I would argue he's not even a libertarian.
Libertarians aren't principled, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think libertarianism is a start. You know, it's not, I would say, perfect, but it has something there that we as objectivists can, you know, find something in common.
It's like our idiot little brother.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
It's like, yeah,
I
he's
think
ours.
Ron Paul was a more principled libertarian, but I'm sure that objectivists will hate his military stance.
Yeah.
Yes.
He was basically isolationist. Well, I don't know. I'm not quite sure that the objectivists really should disagree with Ron Paul on that, because he was very much about defending America, and presumably he would, if he had to, would go overseas to defend American interests. But he was not for frivolous wars, and I'm pretty sure that's a principle of objectivists.
Yeah,
One,
objectivism needs to take a more serious look at whether or not we should be a world police and realize that maybe it's not such a bad thing. But I don't know. I'm still not totally convinced on that. I'm not sure, but I think maybe there's room for us to be world police and not be worried about it.
Well, there's a good example of that. So the threat, the Red Scare, as they called it, that I think is a great example of the United States trying to intervene earlier before the red paint gets all over the East, right? And it's still kind of there, but so I don't know if any objectivist historian has really examined whether that was a good idea, whether that was in Americans' interest, and whether that had an effect or not. Presumably, if Americans did nothing about Korean War, Vietnam, that, I don't know, would things be worse? What would have happened to Japan? If somehow during World War II, if Japan was left mostly intact, would it have fought communism? Would communism have went over to Japan? I kind of doubt it. I think Japan probably could have held its own over there, but it'd just be an interesting, different history if the Red Scare went all the way over to the East and then Japan was there by itself, kind of thing. I'd be curious what would have all happened.
Yeah, and this is all just a footnote to the fact that we industrialized Russia from 1940 to 1944. If we wouldn't have done that, then we wouldn't have had to fight them.
Well, remember last Hangout, I was talking about that. What if instead of allying with Russia, if we let Germany and Russia fight it out instead of helping out Russia? I wonder if the Red Scare would have been a lot. Maybe there wouldn't have been a Red Scare.
Yeah.
So,
It would have been
Maybe we could have just declared neutrality with the Soviet Union, or declared neutrality with Russia, but still fought the Nazis. I don't know if
or we
that's.
could have just ignored them and not had diplomatic relations at all, and not.
yeah, what I was suggesting last Hangout, and I don't think Jason was there, unless I'm not remembering correctly, but what I was suggesting is that instead of invading Germany, what they should have done is just kept Britain alive and let Russia, which had a lot of troops, and so did Germany, let them basically beat the crap out of each other, because I think they were fairly equal. The west side of Germany, that war ended like a few months. France was run over, and I don't think Spain did very much. And then after that, it was basically the war with Britain and a little bit of North Africa and a little bit of Scandinavia, and then all east, the run over Eastern Europe and to fight the Russians. And I think that those two could have just beat the crap out of each other. I'm sure the Canadians and the Americans could have kept Britain from getting invaded over the ocean there, over the, whatever that's called, that little waterway there. And then I think the Red Scare wouldn't have happened. Like what I was saying in the last Hangout is that it seems like by favoring the Soviets, we actually created a problem later, and that was the Cold War, that was Korea, that was Vietnam. All those things happened because of our support for the Soviets in World War II. And if we had not done that, I think history would be different because we had to clean up that mess later, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
Probably true.
but for example, if like the Nazi would take over Europe, and I think that would be worse.
Well, we
I
do
don't think they would have
see
taken
this.
over.
We do keep seeing this because we actually invested a great deal of money in Germany in the 30s. And if you read about the history of the building of all of the hydroelectric plants in Russia in the 1930s, who built those? American engineers actually had special little towns with special grocery stores stocked with foreign goods for them and them alone to shop at. And they were over there directing the massive throngs of Russian slaves, and Russia would not have industrialized without us in the 1930s. We did that. And the same with Germany. It was rebuilt with gold and machinery from America and France. We rearmed and rebuilt them. In the 1920s and 30s, everybody asked, what's Japan doing with all this steel? We took down all of our elevated railways in New York City and shipped all of the scrap steel to Japan. And 10 years later, we met that steel on the oceans. So when these totalitarian societies get the wealth of just the pocket change that falls out of the Western nation's way of life, just that pocket change can short circuit into violence, and it often does. It almost always does. So it's a repeated story, and we armed Russia, and then we faced it. We armed the Mujahideen, now we are facing them. We've been arming the Middle East for 50 years, and now we are facing them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what do you
Countries
guys?
like that should be left alone. Yeah, go ahead, please.
So this Thursday, the UK is voting whether they will remain in the European Union. Is that correct?
Uh-oh.
Or is it just
No,
Yes.
staged. I mean,
Like it's rigged.
they're going to
Hey.
stay.
What do you
Is
mean
Alex
staged?
Jones? Have you?
Yeah, that does sound like that. Globalists. That's the globalists are coming.
Votes on Thursday.
I
They
think
want us to distract us.
You
Well,
know, the influence in the UK. I think the leftists have a lot of power in the UK. I think maybe the UK will remain.
I hope they leave.
So, yeah, I hope
Yeah,
they
me
leave
too. Me too.
So
For the
you guys
sake of
have no
UK.
mercy.
Oh, they're
They
in
have
trouble.
no
They got to stop what's going on, man.
What's going on?
Islamic immigration.
Yes, they have.
Push
They
for
have a
Sharia.
mayor. Well, their mayor in London is.
It's a Muslim now. Yeah.
The mayor in London. So he was just elected last month? Is that right?
Yes.
And you see, last week already, he's on a campaign to get certain images of women banned, certain advertisements that are too revealing according to his sensibilities. He's aligning himself with radical feminists, saying on the basis that it hurts women's feelings because it makes them feel like they have to live up to a certain body image. And that's the basis that the left radical feminists are taking. He's using that because it's his Islamic sensibilities that.
Just wait, Mr.
He's only been in
Cropper,
office for like less than a month, and he's already pushing his religious Sharia ideals.
Just like the London mayor, just wait for one in Utah, some city in Utah, to get one of those too. Then the United States will be really screwed.
No, we've already got them. In Utah, you can't sell pornography, period. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff in Utah. That's all. But in America, there are 50 different places. You just go across the border, you're in Nevada, and everything's free game right over there. So nobody worries about it. You live in Utah and you want to be naughty, you just drive a couple hours.
By the way, Mr. Cropper, I did meet up with someone who was a Mormon from 8 till 23. And she was married at 19 until 23 to another Mormon. So she was really in it.
Was she Utah? From Utah?
No, in Canada.
Oh, huh. And she got out, huh? Good. Is
Yes.
she atheist now, or is she just Satanist or something?
What was that?
Is she atheist now, or did she go Satanist or something like that?
Yeah, I don't think she's certainly not a Mormon anymore.
Huh.
We should have a hangout and talk about Satanism. That'd be interesting.
I don't know.
So she's a non-practicing Mormon now, or?
No, I don't. I think she's doesn't do any of it. She's out of it.
What about the magic underwear?
What is that?
Yeah, Brandon, what is it?
It's just, boy, it's sweats, sweatpants, the sweatshirt you wear underneath your clothes at all times, and it comes down to here, and it covers up to your collarbone, and it goes down to your ankles. And if those garments, and of course there's no space in the middle, your shirt meets your pants, and so those garments are to remain concealed, and if those show, you're being immodest.
What?
That's the kind of underwear that they wore back in the Wild West days.
Yeah,
You know?
it's like putting the religious significance on long johns. And you hear freaky things like a guy was in a field and the field was on fire and he fell down and his hands and his feet got burned, but the fire didn't burn his garments. So you hear shit like this and it's nonsense. It's obviously not true, you know, but they
That's
say
why
it.
they're magic.
And plus it's a layer of protection.
They are pretty flammable.
If you're, they're fucking cotton. So if you're there with a girl and you both are feeling like you should be a little naughty, then you start taking off her shirt or whatever, and you see your garments, you remember, oh yes, that's right, the Lord's watching, and you button back up and you calm down. So it's an extra layer of protection that way as well. No, they're magical.
Verses printed on them, like
they're very magical.
See,
all this time I thought they vibrated.
You guys have a more optimistic view of humanity, and yet there's something like Mormonism, which should be clearly, a fake to any reasonable person. These golden plates were dug up in Utah somewhere and buried again. Like, what a bunch of crap.
Yeah.
Pretty
Why do
ridiculous.
people believe that shit? That's a very good question.
Oh, they teach it with a very straight face from a very young, early age, and it is a lot of it. A lot of it is a community sort of like you grow up in and around it, and you either toe the line or your whole life will fall apart. All your family, all your friends, everything you do at work and at school, everything you are and everything you know will fall to pieces if you start questioning it. So you just go along and you give hand jobs to your neighbor behind the shed and stuff. And things happen, life goes on, but everybody just lives these very dishonest, very closeted, very paranoid, secretive, immoral lives.
Where's the freedom in all that? If the human race has this need for freedom, and yet you can get stuck in these like convents.
Atheism offers us freedom.
Yeah, I know, but why aren't they seeking freedom? It sounds like they're somewhat happy, or at least are being told that they're happy living in these convents.
Well, I was one of these people, so I don't.
How are you?
They are, I think, fundamentally, they are dishonest.
How would you describe yourself when you were in it? Were you just content? This is how things were?
No, I was discontent. I tried to alert as many of them as I could to their situation, and I tried to bring as many as I could out of the cave with me, but they were very resistant. I told them that their chains were fastened to my mud, and they wouldn't listen. So, I mean, like literally, I went and argued. I went to the bishop, and he's supposed to have a meeting with every kid every 2 years or something and find out what they want. I don't know what the fuck it's for, but anyways. So I went in and I said, I've got these questions here. It says, God dwelleth not in temples made with hands. Why do we build temples if God's not here? And I really caused trouble. And I was 14 at that time when I did that.
Wow.
I was not having it. I was not putting up with their shit. And I was also not welcome to play with a lot of the kids in town. So...
Did they ask for you to return your magic underwear?
No, they actually kept sending guys to harass me. Right up till like 2 years ago was the last time they sent someone.
Guys to harass you.
Yeah, they just knock on the door and say, "Hey, Mr. Cropper, we heard you're from Utah and wondering if you know about the local whatever, I don't know what it is. You know, the local chapter or what it's called. What's it called? Your local ward. Do you know the local ward is over on this street over here and you can go visit on Sunday?" Yeah, well, if I wanted to kill some babies or something, I guess I'd go over and talk to them.
Is there a place in the back where we can give each other hand jobs?
Isn't there a joke about a boat? You're going to go fishing with a Mormon, you have to bring two?
Yeah. If you just bring one, they'll drink all your beer. If you bring two, then they watch each other. They're real hypocrites like that. They won't do anything in front of each other, but as soon as they're away from each other, gay anal sex, hand jobs, alcohol, cocaine, you name it. That's fine.
Yeah,
Really
like most religious people.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
Catholics are like that too.
So are Muslims, I have to say. I dated a Muslim, and my God.
You dated a Muslim?
Oh, yes.
So she was like a wildfire in private.
No, but no, I don't know if I should go into all details. I don't know. It's just
How did that? I can't see you dating a Muslim. How did that end? Did you guys?
I was in college, and she flung herself on me. I didn't have an option. So, and she had done modeling, and she was a runway model for Muslim-style clothing in Paris. She was raised in Paris and born in Casablanca, so it's right out of a Hollywood movie, you know. And she looked like it too. And she threw herself on me. I couldn't avoid it. It wasn't my fault.
And what ended the GSF philosophical conversations? That
she did. She ended it because she was done with me. She used me. So she was engaged at the time, and she wanted to get rid of her virginity before her marriage. So
you were just.
I was that. So that's what a good little Muslim girl is supposed to save herself and blah blah blah. Her dad was an airline pilot. It's true. But that's what good little Muslim girls do, is they just find any good-looking guy they can at the local college who will take them out in the forest in his car and take care of it, and then.
They're not supposed to be virgins when they marry?
Yes, but she had to get rid of it, or else she would allow them that victory. So.
Like their sheets after the first night of marriage, the sheets have to be red, because that shows that they were virgins.
Yeah.
You're making that up.
No,
yeah, that's true. That's true.
That's true, and it was a tradition.
They're retarded.
In Russia, so you bring the sheets out, and if they don't have blood on them, then the woman in Islam they're not nice to the woman, but in Russia it just brought shame on her.
Well, that's horrible. It's not even a valid test.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that your hymen can break without sex.
Right. Well, I won't go into more details about the situation that I had. I think we've gotten to the end of the details I should share, but.
You can break it yourself too, right? I mean.
Yeah, a finger, right? They say. So.
It's horrible. You're making this up, aren't you?
If I could make up shit like that, I would run my own religion.
Well, now there's an interesting topic, because all these people believe this shit about the golden plates. You know, Muhammad says, "Oh, Gabriel, he spoke to me," and everyone's like, "Oh, okay," and everyone believes it. Like, really? So why doesn't somebody decent, rational make up? You know, Brandon, why don't you have a revelation?
I remember.
But make it a good one.
I remember one time. I have a friend who's Baha'i. You may have heard of that. And I asked him once, why wouldn't you think that what if I'm like I've been brought here by God and I'm telling you what you should do. Why don't you listen to me? And like, how could you argue that I'm not some kind of messenger? And he didn't really have an answer. He didn't know what to say, because it's not possible. And how would you know? So it's just, I don't know. It's so thin what it's built on. such thin ice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why when they are criticized, they get really mad because deep down they know that you remind them that they believe, in a bunch of
Yeah, well, I
bullshit.
think they resent, like, I think everyone resents being fooled, right? Or being made to be a fool. And if you don't have an answer for something, then you either, walk away or you get mad because you still want to hang on to it, but you have nothing to comment or reply or to their comment.
Right.
Yeah.
And
So
it seems like if religion, the longer a religion has been around with some history, people look at the length of its existence and the number of followers as a further, justification for their beliefs. Like, well, all these people can't be wrong.
yeah,
But I
that's
wonder, like, the
isn't
very
it?
first people. Sorry.
That's their primary justification often.
But
Yeah,
think about then what is true of the very first people that subscribed to this religion. Because you think about how like Islam started, right? This Muhammad guy just, there had to be a first person where he's just like, his angel spoke to me,
yeah.
and people believe it.
The
Like
thing
those,
is that most of these religions, they're not grassroots movements. They are usually spread by the government, by the powers that be, by interests. They try to make it as a grassroots movement, but in reality, it's like social engineering. You know,
yeah,
Christianity was
that's true.
grassroots, but got taken over, though, right? I mean, it was grassroots to begin with, but got adopted by the bureaucracy and used to further the
like
ends of power.
Christianity.
Yeah.
Well, I've read some books that claim otherwise, that say that actually the Romans came up with Christianity in order to further their power, to increase their power.
It destroyed Rome.
And well, yeah, it destroyed Rome, but in the other hand, it gave the Vatican a lot of power. That was also in Italy.
All right.
So
Well, that was much later, though. Not at the beginning of Christianity.
Yeah, I don't think these people
yeah,
500-year coups.
It's very
well,
long range.
I think that gave them power, no doubt, for the people for the elites, you know. But that's just a theory. I'm not sure about that.
Now, I think that sometimes there are disasters, and people do something that they think is right, but it turns out to be a disaster. And the reason it happened doesn't necessarily mean somebody got something or benefited in some way or got more powerful. Sometimes there are just disasters, Like, who benefited from Nazi Germany's war in World War II? And just disaster. 500-year coup. Yeah, I thought it was a brilliant idea as well. We will touch off the revolution, and in 500 years we will have total power.
I would argue that the World War I and World War II, they were arranged by the elite in order to destroy the Western civilization, to take us back to the Middle Ages, if you will.
I think that's
Because
It sounds like
people.
Alex Jones.
Yeah, it's just a conspiracy theory, but I think it's plausible because the principalities, the kings, the powerful people, they were losing a lot of power to the common man.
all right. If you take that seriously, then you need to say that our number one priority from this point forward in human history is to do whatever we can to prevent these evil people from arranging this sort of situation again. And that's not what we need to focus on. We need to focus on preserving freedom and fighting our enemies.
Have any of you guys heard of Jesse Ventura?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, he used to do a little YouTube channel called Off the Grid. He hasn't done it for probably a year now, but he was doing all the conspiracy stuff at one time. I think he had a TV show or something that he was doing some.
Yeah. It got canceled after the first season, I think. It was about UFOs, conspiracies in general.
Yeah, and JFK.
And Super Fin guy, you buy into some of that shit about pyramids or something. There's something you bought into, I remember.
Shit about pyramids.
Pyramids, like that, they were built by aliens,
Yeah.
right? Well, I think that it's not aliens. It wasn't aliens, but I think that the Egyptians had some some better technology that we think they had. I think that for example, we found that they built batteries. That they had a very advanced knowledge of acoustics. They were pretty smart for their time, but I don't think that they had help from the aliens.
All right. Well, you're into conspiracy theories or something, I remember. Maybe you...
Well, some that I think are conspiracy facts, not all of them.
Yeah.
So
Some of them actually are true, I know, but...
Would you like a line from Zarathustra?
Yeah.
sure, go ahead.
I would give away and distribute until the wise among men find joy once again in their folly, and the poor in their riches. What does that mean?
Did I get?
The happiness is more about daily life than about wealth or prestige, something like that.
Remember when I was reading earlier when he was talking about, well, I think it was Aeschylus and Sophocles, who had this view of tragic heroism, that life is hard but we should still try to defeat it and we should still be optimistic about it. And then what Nietzsche villains, the Euripides and Socrates, who said that no, we actually can, evil in the world is just ignorance, and if we rid ourselves of ignorance then we'll have a utopia kind of thing. And Nietzsche called that dogmatism. And I think what he's saying here when he says the wise again will find joy in their folly, I think he's saying that the wise will find out that they don't have the answer, that there's more ignorance. We haven't gotten rid of all the ignorance yet, and they'll find joy in finding that out to work on more things. But the next part, the poor in their riches, I don't know what that could mean.
Well, because if you're poor, you have a lot more going for you when you wake up in the morning than somebody who's wealthy. If you're poor, you have the whole world open to you. If you're wealthy, you're tied down by 1 million or more things. So how do you just walk away and change everything if you're wealthy? How do you just change your life and just say, don't want this wife, don't want this life, don't want this job, don't want this house, don't want this mortgage, don't want these cars? But if you're poor, fuck, get on a bus, go somewhere, go to the beach and get a job in a bar. Fuck it, what the hell? So the poor have more to live for on a day-to-day than the rich. The rich are tied down and they're not free at all.
The poor have less obligations.
Yes, and they need to find joy in their riches in that way. Nietzsche goes on about that a bit here and there, about how the poor are better off than people who are tied down in other ways. So I hear echoes of that in other things he said. I don't know if that's exactly what he means here, but it seems to echo things he said about that.
Yeah, okay, but then how do you square that with the Ayn Rand view that pursuit of wealth is what we should be doing?
No, pursuit of productivity. He says productivity is a virtue. Right, she didn't die a millionaire. Did she die a millionaire? No.
Right, but she didn't die poor.
Well,
Right.
I think the purpose of an objectivist life is to pursue your values, to keep your values.
Yeah, regardless of...
Wealth can be a secondary consequence. But
to take an example, though, like
Howard Roark
you've heard of like minimalism,
trying to create buildings that he wanted to create. That was his purpose in life.
well, take an example. Could you defend minimalism, which just means you live like on as little as possible? Could you defend that from an objectivist perspective?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
It's not an out of context value. It depends on what you are trying to accomplish in your life. If I said I have to pursue wealth as some regardless of what I want to be happy, that would be altruism. Because then I have to give up my happiness to just make a bunch of money,
Yeah.
which is what people do when they choose a career that they don't really want because their mother wants them to or something.
I would say the minimalist thing, I would address it from, you're probably aware of a thing done by Peikoff about values and symbols, and he did a whole speech on it. And so let's take the minimalist view of of Warren Buffett's car, right? He has to drive through downtown Bismarck, North Dakota, to get to his skyscraper every day. So his car is just whatever old car he's been driving until his wife makes him get another one. He doesn't have like a stretch limo or something. So he's taking a minimalist approach. You can't fault him for that. It gets him there and back, and he doesn't care if people see him in something. He's got billions of dollars. What does he care what people think? That's fine. But if you want to drive a particular vehicle, you also couldn't fault him for buying a Lamborghini Countach or something. He has the wealth, and if that made him happy, then you couldn't fault him for that. But it would be a waste of money in some sense. If that's his value, that's his value. You can't fault him for that. But the work Peikoff did, or what he mentioned in his thing about symbols, was you should choose the car to drive that talks to or accents or symbolizes something about you and who you are. And he said, for example, he said, if I came in here every day wearing a purple mohawk and a spiky leather jacket, and I said that I'm a philosopher, well, how would that even be a reasonable thing to do? So when he decided he wanted to be a philosopher, he got a trench coat and a bowler hat. And he said that he thought he loved his new coat. And if he would have just got this trench coat before, then he wouldn't have, it just would have been a coat. But when he said, I'm going to go into philosophy, now I need a philosopher's coat, and he went and got it, and he loved that coat. And so if you invest some meaning, even if it's just your own personal symbolic meaning, if you invest some meaning in your decisions, that can bring happiness in life. Whereas $500,000 for a Lamborghini Countach, fine, if you want to do it, fine. But if you invest something with a symbolic meaning, then it means more to you and gives you more happiness. That was Peikoff's.
Yeah, like for example, a lot of rich people, they have sort of like empty lives, and they try to buy more things in order to feel, to enrich their lives. But I also heard that rich people are usually depressed because they don't know what to do with their lives, because they think that they reached all their goals.
Yeah.
But in my case, I see money just as a way to reach your goals. It's not the goal, for example.
Yeah. If you're poor, you always have wealth to look forward to. But if you're rich, you kind of say, well, I'm not happy. Now what?
Yeah, exactly. Because they need to have a purpose. Yeah.
Do you think of any examples in The Fountainhead or Atlas Shrugged where there's a character who's portrayed as being at least objectivist-minded, but who's also poor?
Yeah. Red.
Who?
Red. He talked. No, his name wasn't Red. It was Mike. He called Howard Rourke Red, and they talked. They drank beer in the pub at the construction site.
Howard, yeah. Well, he probably made money though. He wasn't poor, probably.
He was a skilled worker.
Yeah.
Or how about Howard Rourke before he became an architect? Back when he was catching flying hot metal things.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, he had ambition to make money, though. I'm thinking of someone like, is there an example of a minimalist who would, like, did Ayn Rand ever portray a minimalist as having objectivist principles? I'm just curious about that.
Like somebody who wants to.
I can't think of any.
Somebody who wants to reduce all of their expenses and just kind of live in a cabin in the woods and just read books all day.
Like, I suppose you could even say John Galt to an extent did that, right?
Well, I was going to mention that, but the whole plot of Atlas Shrugged is unfair because Richard Haley also fits that, but they all abandoned it for the ulterior motive of destruction of society and, you know, taking away the motive power.
Well, what I was thinking of is when Galt goes Galt, and he works as like a polisher, like some rag polisher guy for the railroad or steam engines or something like that. He goes down to like a crappy job and lives in a almost like a working house or something like that. And he has his engine in his closet or whatever. That, I guess, is an example of minimalism, right? But he was kind of rebelling from society or trying to hide or whatever.
Yeah, so to do that without the goal of destroying society would be, no, that would be strange.
I think it's kind of
So
like
that's another. Go ahead.
well, I mean,
I think that would be like a sacrifice, you know. That will be like you know, taking value out of your life to be a minimalist.
yeah, I'm just wondering, like minimalism, I don't see that as a value that you would pursue in and of itself. It seems like you might live a minimalist life in order to pursue some value.
I think it's a consequence or a side issue. Yeah.
Like think of people that homestead.
Like yeah, exactly. Like for example, if you want to escape the society that we have today and sort of live in a objectivist environment, you could, you know, go to Antarctica or something and live there. You have a minimalist life, but at least you would be attaining your highest value, that is you know, to live in a, you know, in an objectivist environment.
Or you don't have to go to Antarctica. Andrew, how do you apply it to homeschooling?
What do you
Is
mean?
that what you said? I think you said that. I thought.
Oh, homesteading. Homesteading.
Homesteading. Oh, okay. I see. I thought
Like
you...
have you guys heard of the seasteading movement?
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, they're trying to build cities on the oceans.
Brilliant.
You know, so I hope they succeed. But I think they're the way they're driving the whole thing. I think they're like they say that they don't want to be fully independent. They want to be, you know, hosted by a country. You know, so I don't think they're on the good direction anymore.
Yeah, they'll probably make a mess of it, but, you know, most new countries do. How many revolutions have we seen that were a success in the last 200 years?
Well, I would say just the American Revolution.
Yeah, just one. Just one.
Yeah. So that's
because
go ahead.
Yeah, I was saying that I think that was because the people that were behind the American Revolution, like Franklin, for example, he was a genius, you know, and people in general from the 1700s, like the big thinkers from that time, they were all geniuses.
Napoleon's revolution failed, and he was pretty smart. Not a genius, though, huh?
Yeah. I think he was good at making, you know, military strategies, but I think that was it. I think.
I'm not sure why our revolution worked, but it did, and if you give credit to just the fact we had geniuses around, then you might just take a genius and go try another revolution. So I don't think we could to reduce it that far. Not only were they geniuses, they were educated and they were Aristotelians.
Yes. Yeah, they had the right philosophy.
Yeah. So, and I don't know why, given our example, why can't anybody else in the world get it right? Jesus Christ.
Because people don't like selfishness.
Yeah.
And
think it's equal.
Yeah.
Morality
Like,
trumps.
morality sucks for them.
When there's an argument of you could get rich, and then the answer is yeah, but that's immoral. The person who says it's immoral is going to win when it's, you know, politics and running a nation. And then behind the scenes, they can do the rich thing, but in public, they're going to do the moral thing, even if it means wrecking the economy. Look at Soviet Russia. They did the moral thing every time. It was a disaster, but they did it. So they did what they thought was moral. And
But I think that they are like big hypocrites. I think that their real intention was to get free things, you know, and disregard justice, you know. I think that that was just an excuse that it was the moral thing to do, but in the end they just wanted free stuff, like the people of today, you know. They invent all kinds of excuses, but in the end they just want to rob someone else.
Right.
Yeah, you know, I had this Facebook discussion. So there was an article about a professor, a Marxist professor who traveled the globe and lived all over the world and checked out, you know, different countries and how socialism was functioning. And after doing this, he actually rejected socialism. He says socialism doesn't work. I was very impressed that this guy was honest. His name was Jack Stauder, and he traveled to more than 110 countries to pursue various forms of research, notably cultural anthropology. Stauder described his conversion from Marxism as a process of disillusionment. And I am friends with a guy who is a big Bernie Sanders supporter. And this guy's very unintellectual. He won't read books or anything. And if you try to put forth an idea about anything, and he can't answer it, he'll always end the conversation with, "Well, that's just a good theory, but you need to live in the real world." But he doesn't think ideas have any connection to the real world. And anyway, so I just posted this article and I shared it with him because I thought it would just be a reference for him that maybe someday in the future, if he has any doubts, that he might remember that there was a Marxist professor. I mean, he's not going to listen to me, but maybe he'll connect with this Marxist professor. And I put it up there, and he responded to me. We had a long conversation. And, you know, it was pretty pointless conversation, of course. But when it got down to it, I was just trying to explain to him, look, the moral reason why I reject socialism is because my life is my own. I don't belong to anybody. And that's kind of like a moral foundation. And his response to that was to viciously attack the idea of selfishness. And I just said that, like, my life is mine. It doesn't belong to anybody. And he said, what was his quote? Living control. So you're, well, there's a bunch of back and forth, but he ends this with, I see how it's selfish to want to help people. Well, anyway, I don't want to. I derailed the chain of thought here. I'm sorry, but he ends basically.
Here, Jason. Come on, you're killing me.
He's very against selfishness, and he ends this with, he says, I can see it's selfish to want to help people. You get good feelings out of it. I'm perfectly aware of that. It's a different kind of selfishness than my shit is mine and you can't have it. So I basically asserted that, you know, my life is my own, and that's why. And I asked him the question, what right do you have to force me to help other people? Not that I'm necessarily against helping people, but, you know, me choosing to help somebody is a different thing than you empowering a state to force me to do it. And that's just what he does not understand. He just cannot accept that. And he thinks this attitude that my shit is mine and you can't have it is just the worst thing ever.
Yeah, we're never going to convince them. They're never going to agree. They're never going to accede. All we can do is just say, look, if you behave poorly, we're going to put you in jail. You know.
What was his response when you said that your life is your own? What was his response?
Let me find that exact spot. Give me a second. Most likely he'd change the topic because that's what he always does. But oh, here we go. I said the important. Okay, here I found it. The important argument is moral. My life is mine, and yours is yours. I don't have a right to force you to pay for someone else's health care, etc. That's what I said. This is his response. Sure, in theory that sounds okay. In the real world, it's not enough. There's people that need help who can't help themselves. Sounds a lot like the previous gentleman. Like disabled people who get thrown under the bus and forget about. They get less help than drug addicts. Systems are broken and need to be fixed. This who selfish stuff with I do me and you do you ain't gonna cut it. And it would be a cruel and cold world.
Sounds like a tyrant to me.
Yeah,
he's going to walk around and club people on the head if they don't contribute to his ideal society, right?
Yeah.
To his
absolutely he is. Yeah, he sounds
society of friendship and charity. Contribute to my society of friendship and charity, or I'm going to club you in the face.
Does he volunteer in soup kitchens?
No.
No, of course not.
Well, he probably does.
If he really believed that, then he'd be spending many hours a week.
I'll be surprised if he's doing any voluntary work or anything.
He lives in his mom's basement.
Wow. Well, you should tell him about the real world then. Tell him about his real world.
Well, what I found interesting, I just said my life is mine. He can't force me to do stuff. But from that, he concludes that
that you don't want to help other people, or that
they don't care about anybody.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they love to do that.
Think about if you apply that to sex, that concept of sex. Like a woman says, I should be able to choose who I have sex with. And somebody says, oh, that means you don't ever want to have sex with anybody.
Yeah.
That's not what that means. It means that I should be able to choose, right?
Yeah, you should try that tactic on him and say that, well, what if there was a proportion of people that don't get any sex, so we should redistribute the sex?
It's perfectly logical arguments.
We have that system. Hey, I just want to mention, I don't want to derail it, but that's what the one-man, one-woman marriage thing is. But anyways, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Otherwise, the rich...
What do you mean?
Rich, handsome guys would get all the women, wouldn't they? Like 20% of the men would get all the women, wouldn't they?
Oh, because women just want to go to the rich guys?
Yeah.
With the rich guys?
And the rich guys want to use women.
Say again?
Are you saying like the moral? I think is the grander point that people think that if you don't regulate something, then there'll be huge inequality. Is that the grander point there?
Yeah, I think our system of the one-man, one-woman public marriage thing is a system that evolved to create the stability and to counteract the chaos of having a whole bunch of men who'd had no reason. And once you give a man a wife and he has a kid, he has a reason to go to work. But if he can't find a wife, he is a wild gun.
And you're saying women would not freely choose to, they would only freely choose to be with the George Clooney's.
If it's legal, then...
I heard, Mr. Cropper, you'll appreciate this, I heard Charles Murray say, I'm not sure what book it was in, he wrote little booklets about, I can't remember which it was, but he said something about that women civilize men, and that if you get married, then apparently men even lose a bit of their testosterone when they get married and have kids and stuff. But it's the same kind of idea, though. But it's from Charles Murray.
Yeah, it's probably losing ground is probably where he said that. But we're up against a situation where we've got women have no reason to marry. They have no motivation for it. They can have kids. As long as they don't get married, their house is paid for, their food is paid for. They don't even have to worry about getting a job. Their kids get a free education. They have no worries. So they have no reason to get married. So there's all these men who can get laid, but they can't, and then they're trapped into paying for the kids that they have, but they have no effect on the kids. They can't raise them. They're not responsible men. They're just fathers from a distance, if even that. So it's disintegrating society. We need to, and the other option is Islam, where the rich guy has 10 or 15 wives, and then there's a whole bunch of guys who don't have wives, and that creates craziness.
Was that in the Mormon religion too? Was there polygamy?
Yeah, which was just Joseph Smith started at the very, very early stages, and it just stuck for a long time. But he basically said to his wife, he said, "The Lord told me I need to have sex with the secretary."
Yeah, he was a con artist.
Yeah, he was a con artist, a liar, and a convicted fraud. He was convicted of fraud in New York State.
If I can ask you, Mr. Cropper, how old were you when you got out of Mormonism?
14 or so.
Oh, okay. I was wondering though, if you had been older, I was going to ask you were you expected to have multiple wives?
No, that's not allowed anymore. And in 1960, no, that was the civil right. In 1904, I think it was, Congress had passed a law saying that polygamy was illegal in all 50 states, or all, whatever, 42 states or whatever at the time. And that same week, the president of the church had a revelation that the time and the need for polygamy had passed, and that one man, one woman marriages were now going to be the norm going forward in the church. So the Lord called on the phone the same week that Congress budgeted for the troops to go to Salt Lake City.
Why did the Congress pass that?
Because
what do they care?
The Mormons seem like filthy animals. They're out there screwing 8 or 10 women each. They attacked wagon trains that went through. They were a religious cult. They thought they were their own country. The Mormons thought that they were their own country. So
why did the Congress pass that law?
More power to them.
It was a religious state with a dictatorship with Brigham Young at the head.
Brigham Young, wow. Brigham Young, is that what that means?
Brigham Young.
Why did the Congress pass that one woman, one man law? Was that to counter the Mormons?
It was a law throughout the states. It's just taken for granted. So what they basically said was, we're now going to enforce it in Utah, and Utah had 2 options at the time. It was to become a state, and so their options were either you change and you can become a state, or you don't change and we send in the troops and take care of it, and then you don't get to be a state, plus we're going to occupy you and change your state government and take control.
Wow, so, no choice at all.
Yeah, no choice at all. Basically, the federal government was putting the screws on them.
Don't you think most people prefer monogamy, though? Most humans?
I think so. Yeah.
I mean, women tolerated Mormonism and Islam, but I think it's because they're brainwashed. And
brainwashed, and sometimes they feel trapped. Like
right.
Maybe they will face violence. You know, they will be cast away. So, you know, I think there are pressures for them to not to leave a situation like that behind.
Yes, maybe I should clarify exactly what my position would be. It would be a one wife per man in public. Period. And that just means that publicly, blah blah blah, one wife per man. So, in other words, you're leaving the option open that whatever happens behind the scenes happens behind the scenes, and you don't need to prosecute or persecute for adultery and stuff, or I don't know, maybe you do, who knows what. But the fact is, go ahead. I've said what I needed to there.
I think that happens anyway, because a lot of people, they cheat on their spouses.
Right.
You know. Yeah. But I think as long as the people involved agree on on having an open relationship. I think it's okay, but I think promiscuity. I think it's not a healthy, life choice. But people do whatever they want. I don't think
Why
it
do
should be
you
illegal.
why do you want to pass
But I
laws
think
on
it's
these?
wrong.
This sounds like social conservatism or something. Why would you want to pass laws on marriage?
That
Like, who
doesn't sound
cares?
like a free society, what you're talking about.
What was that?
No, I'm agreeing with you, sorry.
Oh.
Like, what
Yeah, well, I
would,
don't understand saying this one man, one woman thing, because that's up to people, whatever they want to do.
Yeah, I'm not. Earlier we were theorizing about a zero tax society and what would be the perfect answer and so on. So I'm not theorizing about a perfect society. I'm noticing the fact that stable societies have had that system, and that if we question that system and play with it by doing things like announcing that people can be feminists, they can chop off their penis, they can have kids outside of wedlock, the government will pay for those kids, changing that the stable system of one man, one woman, take care of your woman and your family, that was a very, very stable system. It allowed each man to get a woman, and it allowed society to have a stability that made men into productive people. So I think, that system isn't written in stone, but play with it at your risk, at your peril, because it seems to be a stable system. There seem to be a lot of reasons for it. It's hard to take exception to it. If you take the view that Ayn Rand did, that women are not equal to men in leadership roles, for example, she said they can have any leadership role they want, but they could not be president because, leader of the military doesn't make sense. If you take Ayn Rand's view seriously, that women aren't, that there's something about men that is more masculine in leadership and something about women that is more supportive and nurturing, if you take that seriously, then you have to think about it. You have to think about what its implications are. And it may be the case that men are slightly wild unless they have a reason not to be. And one man per one woman is a way to make sure that more men get a share of what, and it's the only thing men want. Let's remember that. Let's remember that men don't care about getting rich. They'll throw their whole life away to sleep with a girl on a 5-minute notice. So let's remember that. It's their only value for men.
It's a very strong instinct here.
Yeah.
Well,
Who's
I don't
Tiger
think.
Woods? What about Tiger Woods? You have to be gay to not sleep with the women that throw themselves at you when you're rich and handsome. So.
Well, like you were already mentioning, the problem with single men is not polygamy. The problem is, like you said, the welfare state and feminism.
Yeah.
So that's why I don't know, why would you pass a law at all about marriage? Like, sure, let's accept everything you've said. Let's say that it does make a more stable society. I still don't think that means that it should be a law.
Yeah.
Right, so egoism makes a better society too, but we should fight this battle philosophically, not politically.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
Yep.
Yeah. I'll just play devil's advocate because I really agree with you essentially. But what I do wonder, what sticks in the back of my mind is these laws, this system was come up with in the 17 and 1800s by people who understood more about masculinity and femininity than we do, because we've buried it under decades of evasion and lies. So what if we try to ignore this and try to say women are equal to men in every way, and it doesn't quite work out the way we think? So what if it's one thing to say, yeah, let's not have the welfare state, but sexual freedom and women voting, I'm afraid we're going to have a conversation about whether women should vote. And I don't think Go ahead.
Can I ask, being a Canadian, I don't have to know these things. Where is there marriage in either the Bill of Rights or the Constitution or the amendments? Does it talk about marriage somewhere in there?
That's one thing I was actually going to say a second ago, was marriage may or may not be something that legally needs to be done in a proper society. It could be just a private contract of some kind that is enforceable through just a few basic laws like inheritance or whatever. Right now it's a huge deal because of taxes. You know, the tax system is what creates the need to keep track of who's married to who and why and when. So,
did my question get through? Because
perhaps I thought I answered it, so perhaps it didn't.
Well, you were asking if there's marriage in the Constitution. I don't think so. I don't think so. I'm not totally sure. Yeah, I think not.
Not that I know of.
Yeah.
Okay, so then how can the feds pass any kind of law about marriage? It seems like it's off the table.
I guess it's feds magic.
Like I say, it's for tax purposes.
Also, I think it's something inherited from religion. The idea of marriage that we kind of have right now, it's heavily influenced by religion, I think.
Yeah, true. Marriage law doesn't come out of a vacuum. It came out of beliefs in the church and whatever, religious. It's a religious institution, or we inherit it in that form. So, well, listen, guys, I think I'm going to call it a night now. I do want to say a couple things before we finish. Notice that when we had somebody like here we are, we're basically four objectivists. When we had Pyrrho, who's insane, and Leram, who thinks he's an objectivist but is actually a crazy rationalist of some kind, when they're here, there's like constant hubbub and back and forth and bubble double. But when it's a bunch of objectivists, it's sort of like, yeah, I agree, yeah, that's true, yeah, right. So keep this in mind and think about it, that good conversation does somewhere come from some kind of disagreement.
True. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, there has to be like a difference for things to flow. It's sort of like in physics. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and I guess tomorrow we'll have a hangout about the Wolfram ideas, right?
Oh, I'm looking forward to that. Yeah.
Me too. I've read some stuff about him. And I think that he's sort of recycling old ideas. I don't think the things that he's saying are his discoveries, but I think it's good that he's bringing them to the mainstream once again.
Yeah. Well, he's not only you're right. It is a lot of stuff recycled from what people have discovered earlier, but for him to synthesize it, put it together in a digestible form and point out what this means for the future, not just look at this and this could be that and here's an interesting theory, but he's pointing it out and saying we can't just say that this is an interesting theory or a weird phenomenon. This is the future, this is important, this is the way it's going to be, and it's going to shape everything that comes after it. So I think maybe he didn't discover all of it, but he noticed it and he conceptualized it and he has put it into a form that we can talk about it now and move forward. You know, he systematized it in a way. So, yeah, but anyway, we will talk about that.
Okay.
All right.
Well, good night, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
See you all tomorrow.
See you tomorrow and next time.